CIUT 89.5, Toronto.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Turnout Radio. I'm Nicole Hamilton. Today's special broadcast lays focus on the depth of shadeism. This afternoon, I am so delighted to welcome Esie Mensah and the cast of the Dora-nominated production Shades. Making its debut at the 2019 Fall for Dance North Festival, Shades re-examines the wound that is colorism. Joining me now is the choreographer of that powerful production, dancer, movement director, and speaker, Esie Mensah. Esie, welcome to the show. So great to have you here with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole. It has been quite a week.
It really has. This has been a very heavy week for many of us. And I know you and I had an opportunity, Esie, to speak prior to today's session. And before we step into the conversation in particular of shadeism, let's talk about the climate of our world right now, in particular, speaking specifically about the police brutality that we've been seeing, the tearing, the ripping of Black bodies across our world has been astronomical. And I'd like to start there with you to see what your thoughts are before we step into shadeism. So can you share that with us?
I definitely can. I think right now is the time where we can't hide anymore. Everything that could have happened behind closed doors is now happening out in the open. Everybody always says that there's no difference between what is happening now versus what happened 50 years ago. We just have cameras to document it. So we always think that people were hunting us and people were lynching us and our bodies were disposable in a lot of people's eyes. But we have to know that it's like now power is shifting, even if we don't necessarily feel it. There's a time, the fact that this is happening now with COVID, everybody's home, everybody's here. So everybody's on their phones, so no one can escape it. When you have work to do, or if it's happening in the States, but you're like, I have to go to rehearsal, I have to choreograph this thing, it doesn't sit in the same way that it normally does. When it sits in the body, because you can't escape it, everybody on your timeline is talking about it, it's on the news, it's everywhere. Every time I see a Black person, a Black body, we as a cast came together this week and it just was like, whoa, you know, it's a interesting time in the world to be Black and to feel pride in that, to not feel ashamed, to feel anger. And this is the first time I think ever that nobody can run away from it. It's a really interesting time.
Yeah, indeed. And it's really, I love what you said there, Esie, you know, with regards to the feeling part, because it's important that we are allowed, we have the permission. We definitely have the permission, and we don't need to ask for it, to feel the way that we need to feel during this time. And the fact is that this is not a new thing. This is something that has been happening for generations and generations.
And I think that it almost is like COVID is actually helping for the people that don't have work. Like if I had to think about like performing or choreographing, you know, I would be at Shaw right now. I would be a mess. I would be a mess to be able to show up for people, to show up for work. So there's a lot of people, you know, there's a mutual friend of ours, she said that she was just like, she's taking personal days. She's taking personal days. And I feel like it's the mental health of Black people right now to be able to consistently go on your timeline and feel like, okay, we're making progress. No, we're not making progress. We're making progress. No, we're not making progress. We're still being killed. Like to see that information being put on your timeline every day as a Black person, like that to me is a huge discussion. After COVID is done, like that has to be a discussion about the mental health of Black bodies during this time of COVID, seeing Black people being disposed of in the States. That is something that has to be discussed. It shouldn't be a part of regular life.
It definitely does need to be discussed. And when I think about the fact that I've had many individuals who have reached out to me this week, and in particular, many white individuals who've reached out and said, what do we need to do? How do I support? What is your answer to that? Because that in and of itself is such a weighty question.
Yeah.
When a white person, a white body asks, what do I do to support you in this time, in this season, as we're going through this? What do you say to that, Esie?
I've had multiple people say Google, do your homework, because I know that a lot of them are putting up their hands in surrender, saying, I really want to help. I really want to be there for you. I really want to show, improve, and show up for your community, because now it's hitting them in a different way. It's hitting them in a different level. These bodies, since Trayvon Martin, since like Philando Castro, these bodies has been happening for years. BLM, if I'm not mistaken, like formed in 2015. So there's no difference between what's happening now in 2020 than what happened in 2015. Why are we all getting on the bandwagon now? And even including myself, like I had to ask myself that question. What is the difference between then and now? Why is it hitting harder now? Because we think that we've improved? I don't know. But I think for a lot of non-Black people, I'm not going to exclude any other POC community in this either, because it's not just white bodies, it's all non-Black bodies need to show up, need to understand what their privilege is, what it is that they've been doing, how they've benefited from it, how other people haven't benefited from it. I've had to ask myself this question, and related to shadeism, what do I want? If I'm me as a dark-skinned woman versus my light-skinned sisters, what do I want from them? Because that question is so loaded. It's so loaded, because then it's really is just like, do I want to dismantle your platform? Do I want you to never date another man again? Like, what is it that I want from you that's going to make me feel better? That's going to make me feel like I can stand here and feel validated. I can stand here and feel ready to have this conversation with you, so that way you know what my pain is. You know how it feels to be shut out. You know how it feels to be forgotten, to be, pushed over for the light-skinned girl. Like that rhetoric keeps happening. So then when I thought about that within the terms of shadeism, I then had to turn and be like, what does that look like in the realm of racism? What do I want from white people? And to be honest, I still don't know. But I need you to do your part, because right now the cross that we are bearing as Black people is too much. Then I think that's why, sorry to cut you off, Nicole, but I'm just saying, I think that's the reason why, like, having this happen right now in this time that we are existing in this universe during COVID, it's forcing everybody else to show up for Black people or not, and dealing with that, whatever that looks like.
So then let's talk about the showing up part, and the part that you're speaking of in particular about doing your part, because I think that right there is the crux of what a lot of individuals are asking. Well, I know that I have to do my part, but what does that look like?
Yeah.
Because saying that you are not racist is not enough. So when you say doing your part, what does that look like? That's something that I'd love to investigate here in this conversation. I think, about the many, again, who have reached out and have said, okay, shall I attend, for example, a group or a forum or something that teaches me how to have understanding, how to appreciate Black bodies? What does doing our part look like?
You know how they have like Mothers Against Drunk Driving? Like they have Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I feel like there needs to be a POC White People's Anonymous, where you have a space where you can talk, where you have a space where you can actually sit there and discuss and understand as a community what is actually happening. Because to have Black people go through what it is that we're going through, and then be the one to sit there and be like, oh, hey, let's go through this. No. You can't put that pressure on us. It's really, for me, at least, there needs to be some type of roundtable talk, some type of talk where everybody can be honest. They can spit out their biases, because that's the thing. I think that people are afraid to be wrong, and you need to be wrong. You have to willing to be to kind of put yourself through the fire. I had to do that when I was creating Shades. And that's why it's like this conversation circles back into the show so beautifully. It's like, I had to sit there and address my own prejudices. I had to sit there and deal with the things that were pent up inside of me since I was 10 years old, since I was 2 years old, since, you know, all of these different events that have happened in my life that have led me down this road to actually even take on this conversation. I feel like all of those things are needed to be discussed, and there hasn't been a space. You know, how beneficial will it be for all people, not just Black people, to be able to know that you can have an open space that allows everybody to know this is what their experience is. This is how it's costing them. Imagine me talking about your grandmother and then just, you know, ripping her apart right in front of your face constantly, in terms of Black mothers that are in the healthcare system and their bodies. For whatever reason, people think that Black people are invincible and that we are just the Hulk. They really think we're the Hulk sometimes, because then it's like when you're in pain, people don't see your pain. People don't see it. You know, if I'm stoic for a moment, and whatever that is and whatever that looks like, then all of a sudden it's like you're not in pain. We can't actually side with you, you know? And I think that being able to understand the levels of how we as a people have had to suppress our pain in various ways, and how that pain then surfaces years later. You know, to me, with shadeism, the topic of it starts as a child. The same thing. It's just like you with racism, it starts as a child and then it morphs into adult hate, into getting out of your car and running after a Black man and choosing to kill him. Like the seed of it starts somewhere. And I think that what we really need to do as a community is start talking about what that seed is and addressing the seed, as opposed to addressing the burning fire. Let's figure out where the fire started.
That's excellent, Esie. And for those of you who are just tuning in, you are watching a live chat with Esie Mensah right now, and the cast of Shades will be joining us shortly. I'm Nicole Hamilton here from Turnout Radio, and so pleased to be sitting here with Esie Mensah. And Esie, let's continue that just a little bit, because one of the questions as well that came in to me prior to this show is a lot of it has been focused on the how to support and the structure and ways of setting up that support looks like. So the question that was asked was, well, if I go in, what about how this can potentially impact me as a white body? And this is the question that did come in from a few different individuals, how that impacts me as a white body. I want to support, says that white body. I want to be there. I want to challenge, but in the face of implications that I might face, what do I do? That's the question that has come in.
Deal with it. Deal with it. When you're asking Black bodies on a regular to be silenced, like I had multiple people. So with my career, being told that I was too dark for jobs was a regular thing. And it wasn't until I started doing my TED Talk that I actually had to let's just talk about this for a second, Esie. Like, how is it okay that you had to stomach somebody telling you that you were too dark, that we really wanted to hire you, but like that outer shell that you have, it's just not going to cut it. So we just can't hire you anymore. You know, to have people that were choreographers having to fight for me for jobs within that exact same thought. Like, why do we have to tolerate this venom? You know, I said it in a prayer that I in my Thursday night live, I was like, we have to turn this venom into gold. And us as Black people, we have constantly had to swallow and figure out a way to exist and still do our jobs, without having people really think about, what does that do? How does that affect me? How does that affect my body? How does that affect my spirit, having to still function? So for white people that are just like, I'm impacted, I don't know what to do with it, it's just like, talk to a Black person. You're not going to get a lot of sympathy, you know? And it's like, but at the same time, it's just like, then when you understand how much it's actually impacting you, then we can have a discussion, because then you know what the stakes are. You understand what it is to mean to lose something. You know, there's so many times that we feel silenced on work because I don't want to look like the angry Black woman. I'm already dark skinned, having to think, well, no, I definitely didn't think of it, but it's just like the thought of having to bleach my skin. What does that look like? What does that look like? You know, how can I then bleach my skin and then raise children that are potentially going to be as dark as me and be like, love your skin? You know, what does that conversation, how does that conversation truly, truly unfold? And I think you have to be willing to risk. You have to be willing to risk, because you have to understand that the system has been built in their favor. So for you to then go against the system, now you're going to feel what everybody else has been feeling this whole entire time.
Indeed.
You have to be willing to risk it, because then if enough people are starting to shift the pendulum, then maybe the system can actually change.
You know, that brings me to a quote that has been posted many times throughout the course of the past couple of weeks. Esie, Desmond Tutu had said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a tricky place. Like I talk about this often with my partner, because, you know, are we forcing everybody to have voice? Is that fair? Is that fair to force everybody to have a voice, to force everybody into action? I want you to want to come into action. I don't want you to feel forced. I don't want to feel like we're grabbing people at the neck and saying, hey, if you don't get on, honey, you're just going to have to just delete all Black culture, you know? Like, I don't think that, me playing devil's advocate, I don't think that that's helpful either. I think that we really need to continue to have conversations, me, you, and a white person having a conversation to be like, let's talk through your prejudice, because white people are not always in the spot where they have to actually speak through their prejudice, speak through the things that they've had to go through, what the ways that their parents have conditioned them. Like, I just found out maybe a couple days ago that a friend of mine that I had in elementary school, that I used to go to her parents' house often, didn't know that their parents were racist. I'm like, yep, but you had a Black body in your house. You know, finding out now at 35 years old that when we were, you know, in elementary school, that her parents were racist. It's just like, you know, like, you don't really, when we feel like we know people, we don't really know people. And although she has chosen a different path than her parents, that's the way her parents are, based on the stereotypes that they've been fed. You know, it's like the system is so fine-tuned. They've built their 500-year plan. I feel they've really built a plan that includes this in it, because for them, they don't want to see Black people have their due time, because that unity is a very, very powerful thing.
Wow, strong testament. And you know, one of the other things I was thinking about as you had brought forth all of that was the fact that to ask a Black body a question, and I'm going to come back to that because you'd share that, ask questions. That is definitely important. I think also be prepared for the fact that we may not want to answer some of them. And that also alludes to another piece of your share as well. There may be times when we do not want to answer the question. Mm-hmm. We are not sitting in a space in that moment where we want to answer. So be prepared.
Definitely. I think people need to understand the honesty that a lot of Black folks are going through, because there's a diversity of experiences. If you get a bunch of Africans that have lived on the continent, they're not going to really understand the issue that's happening with Black America right now. You know, you get anybody that lives in a predominantly Black society coming to see the issues of Black America is just like, what is happening with these people? You know, what is going on? But we have to understand that within the diversity of our experiences, that there's strength in that. Because at the end of the day, the thing that brings us together is our melanin. That's the thing that brings us together at the end of the day, is that's the magic. The magic of our melanin is the thing that we exist in, whether we're here, whether we're in the Caribbean, whether we're in Latin America, in Europe, on the continent. You know, it's just like, it's a beautiful thing to know that that is the thing that unites us. And even if our experiences are different, we know that this is a thing that's going to bring us together.
Beautifully said, Esie. Thank you. Again, for those of you who are just tuning in, you're listening to Turnout Radio here live with Esie Mensah, talking about a very needed discussion, especially given the global climate of what we have been seeing with regards to police brutality. And Esie, today, of course, we are also going to be talking about conversations surrounding shadeism.
Yeah.
And for you, you know, this conversation in particular is one that you have been sharing and discussing on your platform brilliantly. And I'm curious to know, what was the catalyst that propelled you to begin speaking about it in the first place, publicly? What was that first catalyst?
The first catalyst, I had auditioned for Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was done in Toronto, Kenny Ortega, Lou Adler. Kenny Ortega was the director and slash choreographer, and Lou Adler was the original director and producer. We were doing an audition. I had an audition in quite a bit of time. And I had gone to that audition being like, you know what? We'll just see what happens. We'll see what God gives me. And then, you know what? We'll move forward with that. And I remember my sister, Jazz Fairy J, formerly Jasmine Fife. She was with me. And I remember we both finished the audition. We were like, oh, man, you did good. She's like, yeah, you did good too. And I was just like, but you know, they're only probably going to pick maybe 2 of us, maybe even only 1 of us. And she's just like, yeah, I know. She was just like, oh, but Lisa did good too. Yeah. And Christina did good. So then all of a sudden we're naming off all of these Black women that seem to have been in favor of Lou and of Kenny. And we're just like, I don't know what's going to happen. And at that time, Jeff Mortensen, amazing guy, he was the assistant choreographer on the project. He's walking by and he's listening to this. And in short, myself, Jasmine, Christina Dela Cruz, and Lisa Auguste, we all ended up on the gig. And I remember sitting with Jeff and some other friends that were in the cast on the film and bringing it up. Because I was just like, you know, this wouldn't happen. Because he heard us talking. And he was like, why would you guys say that? I said, because Jeff, that this many Black people on a gig, just that doesn't happen. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, it doesn't happen. That means like, this is the alternative film. If this was Descendants 3, different understanding, you know, different grouping of Black people. But if this was Rocky Horror Picture Show, you have not just Black women, you have mainly like medium to dark tones of Black people. And then you have the cast, like the main cast, Laverne Cox, Christina Milian, Ben Vereen, all people that are of darker skin, plus 2 gentlemen, plus her backup singers. Like there was just a lot of Blackness in this film. And I remember sitting there being like, how, you know, what is that? Why do we naturally believe that there's only room for 1 of us? Is because the industry has kind of formed us in that direction. The industry has led us to believe that there's only space for a few and not necessarily space for all. So let's start to dissect that. So I spoke about it. And then I took myself on vacation after, after that I went to Barbados and I went to Turks and Caicos. And while I was there, something in me just started, was like, let's just go down this road of shadeism. Let's go down this road of colorism. And then that's when I was like, oh, I thought this was just like an us issue. Like this is like there's a lot of people that actually have a lot to say about this. And then it started continuing. And then I started creating work and figuring out how it is that you speak through this subject. Took years to really perfect, and I got sick in the process. You know, it wasn't anything that just kind of came overnight. It was definitely a call, and a spiritual and ancestral call that was just like, you need to move towards this, and you need to move towards this, and you need to trust us. Because at some point in time, I literally felt like I was opening up a Pandora's box that had a tsunami looking over me. And I'm sitting at the beach and I'm literally like, fam, are you serious? And you're like, yeah, no, I'm serious. But you're gonna get hit by the tsunami, but you're gonna survive. And you're like, but I'm standing on the beach. Really, ancestors? And they're like, yep, just trust us. And I'm like, okay. I drowned a lot. And but we were able to have individuals that were here, present, and ready.
Well, and
with me, yeah.
Answer the call you did, because the conversation that has been happening has exploded on social media, and it's a needed conversation, as you have said so many times. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that did come into us again from one of our listeners is, what is the difference in particular, as you were talking about shadeism, Esie, and colorism? That is a question that actually came in from 2 different people. And sorry, I should add to that, colorism, shadeism, colonialism is the question that came in from one particular individual. What are the difference between the 3? What does it mean?
Well, colorism and shadeism is the same thing. It was a term coined by Alice Walker. She is the author of The Color Purple. So everybody knows that book. She was the person that actually coined the term colorism. But when me in Canada, I just started calling it shadeism, and that was how I knew it. but Americans tend to call it, Americans, also Europeans also tend to call it colorism. Colonialism, well, people open up a dictionary. It basically is the reason why we are here in Canada. We are here in North America, in terms of the fact that it is white bodies, white, typically Euro bodies that have exerted their power over the diverse communities of this world. So colonialism has literally had its stamp over the world. And the reason why colonialism and shadeism are attached is because of the idea of whiteness being better, whiteness being the tie to greatness, being the ties to, you know, anything and everything that's beautiful, blessed, and worthy. That's really is the word. So that seed that was planted in colonialism obviously created racism, but a lot of people also forget that it also created shadeism. So there was that divide, and that divide has also happened prior to colonialism. Because if you're looking at like ancient Indian scriptures and texts, there's a lot of shadeism in those texts. But I also question whether or not there is also text that also rebuttals those thoughts in terms of the fact that lighter is better. You know, you have people that are darker hues that are technically prejudiced against those with lighter complexions, and those with lighter complexions are being seen as worthy, being seen as greater, being seen as the, you know, the quintessential of the race, essentially. But a lot of times their skin is also mixed blood, either through rape or through choice.
Wow. So then this is something, of course, that, or elements of this have been reimagined, presented through Shades, the production. Okay. And of course, today we're going to be sitting down with members of the cast.
Yeah.
And before we do begin to bring them in today, Esie, I'm also curious to know, how has Shades, I've seen it and it was brilliant. How in particular has Shades demonstrated, for those who've not had an opportunity to see it, demonstrated or provided a deeper understanding of what shadeism is?
Well, I feel that we all kind of came into this as amateurs, and I still feel like an amateur in terms of the conversation because it is so weighty. I always often say that it feels like you're chewing on molasses. There's so much information to have to sift through that it really is very easy to allow it to consume you. But what I feel in terms of the access that we have and the opportunity that we have is to be able to free ourselves and to heal ourselves, because that to me is the root of it. There's pain that is at the source. There's pain that is at that seed, and that seed has allowed me to believe a certain thing the rest of my life. And how I perpetuate it, how I choose to exist in it on a regular basis is usually attributed to the fact that I either feel worthy of something that I may not, or not worthy of something that I feel I should have access to.
All right. Wow. This is so good. And you know, I'm so excited to be sitting here with you today because this conversation, I feel like, has been one in the making, and has been anticipated by so many who've been so curious to have a greater understanding, Esie, about shadeism in particular. And today, you and I are going to have an opportunity to sit down right now, in fact, to watch a short clip.
Yeah.
From Shades. And I also want to remind our listeners that these wonderful artists that are coming together, sharing their time, we appreciate them so much. We know that you do as well. So donations, e-transfers can be sent to info should you wish to give, and we know that you do, info@asiemensah.com, and of course paypal.me/Esie Mensah. So we thank you in advance for those donations that you're able to give. Anything that you wanted to share about that in particular, Esie?
Well, it's interesting. I'm usually always very truthful with my stuff. I originally had done this chat and I was charging $10 because I was just like, okay, I really feel like this could be some really great information that people could have access to. What is that? What does that look like? And I wanted to be able to to me, it's always wanting to bring the conversation forward. We never have enough time to talk about shades. Like, it's already 4:30, and I was like, we have so much to be able to sift through and to go through. I think people don't understand how deep you can really go in this conversation. And I've spent 4 years in it. So for me, getting into the belly of the beast is a regular thing for me, where some people need to kind of like, pull some things back. I need to creep slowly in order to be able to actually deal with the reality of what it is that I'm being faced. Because if you've never had conversations like this with your friends, you're going to get hit with the tsunami and it's going to drown you. And then a lot of times it's going to drown people to the point where they actually don't know how to move forward. And that's not the point. We really want to just introduce people to this conversation, for people to know what it is that these artists have been able to move past, move through, also shed in the process of either, a 1 year, couple months to 4 year time frame of them being a part of this. Not everybody is at the same space that I am, because I've had to create it and co-create it with people. But on the flip side, some other people get a chance to see it very, very differently. And I think that it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to be able to kind of have this gem that's a part of my path.
Thank you for that, Esie. And also thank you as well to our listeners. We know that you are excited to share your comments. Please do. I wanted to share this comment by Carolyn. Thank you for tuning in, Carolyn. Carolyn, you shared that people have been living the implications every day since time, prepared to be called a reverse racist and be ostracized and all sorts of things. Be willing.
Mm-hmm.
This, of course, in regarding our conversation regarding the current global climate. Thank you, Carolyn, and to all of those who are commenting. And we are going to be accepting your questions as well for Esie and the cast today. We will get to as many of those as we can today, so please keep them rolling in. We did, of course, receive this message from Shanice, who says a clip, yes! So we're going to give that to you now. Esie, this clip has how many of your dancers? If you can set this up for us, please.
You can start from the beginning. The piece has the core 5 is myself, Percy, Miranda, Tereka, and Roney Lewis. So it's the 5 of us. It's the idea of us starting as a unit, starting as a, I believed, this was one of the things that came to me in 2017 and really didn't get a chance to realize until 2018, was I felt that we were never this disconnected. There was a time that we could exist and be and not have to worry about looking at my brother or my sister and seeing what their privileges and seeing what their disadvantages are. Like, we could just see each other. And that beauty and that unity, to me, there was a time where that existed before it got fragmented and is now just running wild. So I wanted to hone in on that, hone in on those moments of just pure joy and laughter and discovering each other and seeing the childlike nature within ourselves. When you can play the clip, so you could see it's just like different versions of it evolve over time. And I've had to like splice the clip. I'm depending on how all of this is happening today, I will probably want to do a screening of the full show just so people can see and we can continue the discussion in a different way. But you see the beauty of the bodies just exploring each other and exploring their melanin and not necessarily seeing a difference, but seeing our similarities, seeing what it is that makes us us, what makes you you, and being able to stand in that beauty and move forward in that beauty. And then from there, it's like joy, movement starts to explode, and then things get a little bit spicy. Things get really interesting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into that clip now. Thank you, Esie. Let's show individuals a little piece of what they can expect from Shades. So talk to us a little bit, Esie, about even just the beginning. When I was in the theater, seeing how Shades developed as individuals began, or as your dancers began to move, was quite profound, even as they sat together here. Can you talk us through this?
Yeah, so this is that moment of unity. I kind of felt like we needed to form a shell you know, if you will, form a nucleus before. So it kind of felt like we were birthing each other, if you will. Like, you know, it was 5 individuals that when you see it from the outside, you don't actually see how many people are there. But and it's always we got very up and close and personal with everybody, which is also really nice. But this idea of just breath, the opening and closing, and I have to just give a shout out to you know, Steve Lucas, who's my lighting designer, and to Alexander Lord, who is my costume designer for the show. And just being able to kind of have these bodies, and I should also mention Steve did the lighting and the set design for this, and just being able to kind of utilize their movement to kind of bring them to the point where they can stand, where we can see each other, where we can be together. And then just enjoy, you know, enjoy what it is that we are and who it is that we are. And I think that that to me is it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to see everybody come together in such a great way. You know, it's something very, very unique.
And I like the fact that you mentioned birthing, because that's exactly what it feels like here. It feels like a newness. It feels like just waking up into the world. It feels like new creation, just in watching the movement and how the dancers are approaching what you've given them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the one thing that you can't really hear in the video is that we gave ourselves different names. And this I have to credit to Akosia Amo Edem. She directed the 2018 version with me. So we wanted to not think of, like, when we describe ourselves as shades, it's just like, okay, we are chocolate. I'm dark chocolate. Other people will be like, I'm caramel, I'm mocha, I'm vanilla, you know, whatever it is that we describe ourselves, but we tend to describe ourselves with things that are tasty and food-like. And we wanted to challenge that. And she was just like, what happens if they're textures like, you know, clay or like tar, and finding the joy in those words, especially for tar, for many Caribbean people, you know, that's the same, where you're black like tar. It's not a compliment.
Yes.
You know? And so being able to kind of like turn certain things on their heads, you know? So we had, I was Tar, Tereka Tyler Davis, who is dancing with me right now. She was Rust. You had Percy when he comes in, he was coal. Roney is clay, and Miranda is sand. And the interesting thing about that, and you can continue to skip a little bit forward, if you will. Yes, so you could see that as the bodies move and evolve within them. Yeah. So we paired up different people just to be able to have their moments of joy. So, you know, Tereka danced with Percy, and she danced with me. Miranda danced with Roney and Percy, and then Roney came to me. And then it was just like, and the music that kind of keeps the soundtrack going. The music was done by Santosh and Ian D'Souza, 2 amazing artists in the city. And they were able to kind of bring to life the vision of what it is that I wanted. And to get to the point where, to me, it wasn't like it was a celebration and all of a sudden we're going to be doing like guara guara, you know. It was a celebration that allowed us to be able to kind of come together in a very different way, and be able to see that traditional element fused into that, because I wanted to acknowledge the root and acknowledge our foundation, and I felt like something more traditional was more fitting, and to be able to kind of celebrate. So this is our full moment of celebration, our full moment of joy after exploring ourselves and each other throughout the majority of the piece. And then just after this is where things start to turn and things start to get interesting. And it was a matter of the fact that a lot of people were like, oh, could you not experience joy long enough? Like, do we always have to, you know, forebode joy, you know, for Brené Brown, you know, comment or rhetoric, because she's always just like, you know, are you foreboding joy? Are you always sitting there feeling like, you know, joy has its peak and then it's got to come down because I can't really enjoy that moment? And a lot of people look at this moment and see, and they're just like, oh, I felt like the joy that when I saw this new body walk in, which at this point in time is Celina, you know, is the joy ending? Do we not feel like we can't still be in that moment of joy with this new body in the space. And Celina, which was originally played by Alison Trenzer, which is a local dancer. She now is going to school abroad, but she was, and she's a very white passing Black woman. She's half. Her dad is white. Her mom is Black. She's from Barbuda, or she grew up in Barbuda, and beautiful dancer. And she was with me for the 2018 version. So this section of the piece looked very different when Alison had done it. And Alison's name in the piece was Pearl. So because of scheduling and things like that, Alison had to drop out of the show. So I had to audition people, and Celina was the person that I chose. And I'm sitting there at the audition with Samson and with Akosia, and it was just like, okay, so what do we do? I was like, okay, I like this person. They're like, no, I like Celina. I was like, really? And they were like, yes, she has to be the one that you choose. And I was like, okay, well, she can't be Pearl because she's not light enough. She has to be sand. And they looked at me. I was like, yeah, there's going to be two sands. It's going to be the battle of the sand. So it was interesting because in the idea of shadeism, we never really also speak about the intra issues of shade. The issues between light-skinned people and the issues between dark-skinned people. How it is that we also dismantle each other's platforms when we are the same shade. What is that? What does that look like? So I think that it's really necessary for people to see the fact that it's like in the idea of shadeism, it's not one tone. It's so layered, and it's so complex, and I really have to give it to Debbie Young, because she was the person that challenged me. She was my mentor in the 2018 version. We worked with her for a week. I worked with her 2 days. The cast worked with her for 3. And she was a person that was just like, you can't look at shadeism without looking at colonialism, without looking at systematic oppression. You can't look at it without looking at all of these things, classism, sexism, like everything feeds into it. And before that, I was too afraid to look at the pyramid structure that shadeism was a part of. I was too afraid to do it. At the end of the day, when I asked my friends to be a part of this, I asked them to be a part of a dance show, not therapy. And this show was therapy.
And that's
yeah, go ahead.
Right. And that's something that I'd also like to attack as well, because during the creation process, given how weighty this topic is, what was that like for the dancers? How did you prepare them to meet such an important and needed discussion through movement on dance? What was that preparation like?
I don't even know if it was really preparation. They could speak to it when they could come on. It was really just like, you agreed to be in this show? Let's just hope that we are good to go with it. Let's hope that we can manage it. Let's hope that we can move forward with it. So it really pulled at heartstrings. It really tested the group in very real ways, because it was a question of, am I speaking as my character, or am I speaking as myself? When I'm dealing with the light-skinned girls, am I speaking as my character, or am I speaking as myself? And I think that to me was very eye-opening, because I, for one, was just like, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I can handle the trauma that's coming up. Because it was really, like I was saying, the things that were sitting at the belly of the beast, they were coming up and they were surfacing, and it was very, very difficult to deal with. And a lot of people, I know both Alison, shout out to her, I know she's here, and Celina, they were just like, yeah, shades, I'm really excited. And I was like, okay, let's get in here. And then you get into the ring and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize it was going to be like this. It kind of asks you to reevaluate your life in many, many ways. And for a lot of them, they're still with me. So I have to believe that this is as beneficial for them as it is for me.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Esie. For those of you who are just joining us, you're listening to Turnout Radio. I'm Nicole Hamilton, sitting here with Esie Mensah, talking about shades and colorism, and talking about, in particular, shadeism as well. And I'm so glad that you were able to address the same thing quote, Esie, during this conversation surrounding what is shadeism, what is colorism, because I know that was one of the biggest questions that individuals had coming into this show today. Any more thoughts that you wanted to share with regards to the live feed that we are now watching before we welcome your wonderful cast?
Yeah, it's just, when I think that when people think about shadeism, they think of it separate from everybody else, but it's still within the same web when you're dealing with racism, because our prejudices, when you're dealing with blackness or black people, can show up and going towards lighter individuals because they don't look as intimidating as darker individuals. They don't look as intimidating as dark-skinned women or as dark-skinned men. And how many black men, dark skinned men, are disproportionately being jailed, disproportionately being killed. When you're looking at the plethora of black bodies that have been killed by police or just gun violence in general, a lot of the things have to do with shadeism. So I feel personally that shadeism has a huge undertone in terms of the society and the makeup that we have. If you're looking at movies, if you're looking at, there's how many leading roles do you see dark skinned women in? How many leading roles, like, you would see more dark skinned men than you see dark skinned women? Why is society not okay with seeing dark skinned women exist? What does that look like? Do we really offer something that is so against your norm that you don't want to actually look outside of the box and see us as who we are and see our bodies and our hair and our facial features and everything as beautiful? The fact that I don't need to, if I just happen to get upset, that you're not sitting here clutching your pearls hoping to dear God that I'm not going to hurt you. I think that people have to really open up their eyes and understand that the idea of shadeism and the idea of racism is not the same. It's not always the let's lynch some black people at the tree. It can look like the subtle things that we deal with on an everyday basis. And I think that to me is really what it is that I want to offer people, is that really you need to look at the subtleties. We need to look at the fine details, because those fine details create the roads towards the massive destruction.
Yes, indeed. And I also want to go to a comment that was, or a question, in fact, that was asked of by Shanice, one of our viewers, similar to what we started to address during the creation process. Shanice brilliantly asked, can you speak about the process of taking care of yourself and your cast through these deep explorations, especially with movements and the body being involved?
Soca music. And I know the cast is laughing backstage. There's a lot of soca music. There's a lot of Afrobeat music. We will go into the belly of the beast and we're just like, shake it off. Okay, guys, play the music, hit it. And just honestly, because you have to change the vibration. And we have to be able to like breathe through, exhale, release. Sage is also on deck for me in rehearsals. Samson, who's also going to be here, he's my spiritual advisor in the work that I do. And he just brilliantly is able to also hold space for people in this cast. Same with Okosia, same with Debbie Wilson, like people that have really been able to have a hand in helping to create the show into what it is. It's not a show that you can just wet your feet. You have to be able to go and jump into the deep end with it, whether you're willing to or not. And self-care is very, very, very important to me, to make sure that we are actually able to tackle conversations like this.
Excellent. Well, Esie, thank you. And we're going to now start to move from watching this view. I know that many of you are enjoying watching this clip. And of course, we invite you to donate. You can donate. E-transfers can be sent to info@asiemensah.com and of course to paypal.me/ACMensah. Thank you, Esie, for sharing this portion of the clip with us. It was so powerful to be there in studio and to see that happening and to watch the development of movement occurring during the show. It was brilliantly done.
Yes, thank you very, very much. Well, thank you to my cast, and I'm excited to hear what they also have to say.
Yes, indeed. And before we go to them, Carolyn, thank you for watching and listening. Carolyn says that I appreciate you, all the brilliant cast, crew, everyone part of the process. She continues to say, for throwing yourself inwards and sharing. Really grateful for your generosity and excited to experience Shades again. Thank you for your comment, Carolyn. So we're going to take a break. I'm here with Esie Mensah. I'm Nicole Hamilton. We're going to take a very, very short break and be right back with some members of the cast right after this.
CIUT 89.5, Toronto.
Welcome back to Turn Out Radio. I'm Nicole Hamilton, back with Esie, Mensah. Today, 7 additional cast members from the production of Shades will be seated right here with us. And up first in this next hour and joining us now are, listen, I'm very excited. I've got to tell you, because I got a chance. I got a chance to see them perform. And so joining us now are Miranda, Liverpool. Also coming to the table is Celina Lee, and of course, Roney Lewis. All of them are joining us now. Welcome to Turnout Radio. We are so pleased to see you. And Roney is also going to be joining us as well. Great to have you all with us here on Turnout Radio. It's such a pleasure.
Hi.
Hi, great to have you all. And I really wanted to jump in, and Ronnie's asking how we're all doing, and what a great question, of course. How is everybody doing? They're nodding in slow motion. They're nodding in slow motion. They're good. They're good, Roney. And I want to jump in and start with you, Miranda, because when you look upon your role in Shades, the question that I have is, do you relate to your character at all? Especially after seeing that clip that we've just shown, looking back on it, do you relate to your character?
I do relate to my character. And it was very interesting because during the creation process, we were often, it was recommended to try and break free a little bit of what you might normally do. But my character did wind up being quite reflective of myself, I believe. We're both very loving, caring individuals, very jovial. And really true believers in unity. My character is really wanting to keep kind of her unit together. And even when Celina comes in, she's just very playful and really just wants to be a part of everything that's going on. It's a very big surprise to her when she gets kind of separated from the rest of the group. And I've always been somebody who, you know, in terms of race and skin color, was never really something that I really grew up with. We can say the term colorblind if we would like. It wasn't something that was a huge narrative in my life for a very long time until I started to get older. And I just think that in terms of the same way with the character, I never understood why it needed to be an issue type thing. So I feel like the journey of my character is quite reflective of the journey that I have had in my life. And when it has been something that has started to play a role in my experiences, it's definitely been something that has taken me aback and has been quite a shock to my system. Yeah.
Well, what about the process in terms of any challenges? What was the hardest part of the process for you?
The hardest part, probably kind of like I said, I found it difficult a lot of the times to not necessarily react in a way that would be natural to myself. Maybe that requires more acting lessons on my part. We did a lot of exploration in creating this piece. A lot of days we would just walk in and Esie would just say, okay, let's just start with, you know, Miranda standing over there, Roney there, maybe nobody talk to Tereka, and, you know, Percy, go give Miranda a hug and let's see what happens. Go. And we would just start creating something, and an hour and a half later, everybody would be yelling, bodies would be flying across the room, like the stuff that wound up happening. But then also to be like, but try to go beyond what you would normally do. Don't be afraid to be a villain. Don't be afraid to, you don't always have to try to be nice. You don't like, and so trying to go against what my natural nature was a lot of the time, I found very, very difficult. to be able to do. I think for a lot of us, as we started to go into the exploration, we started to find out that there were things in us that maybe we didn't know were in us. But definitely when you would start things out, it's very difficult to kind of pick a different path, especially if you need to try and pick the path of the quote unquote villain.
Right.
I found difficult to kind of try to put myself in that role a lot of the time.
So there was room to explore. It seems that Esie gave you that room to
Yes.
explore. Right.
Yes.
So then, did you find the lines ever blurred between character and dancer?
I would say so. I can't speak for everybody. I would say so. Everything from within yourself, I definitely knew that there were times we would be in exploration and I would get to a point where I would be so angry or so hurt, like so angry at something that somebody had decided to say or do, or a way they decided to touch me. I can still feel my hands on Tereka's throat and being like, is this happening right now? Yes, people, it got there. We went there. I was like, is this happening right now? And it was scary. It was scary to be like, where is this coming from? Where is it coming from inside of me? And also, so lines blurring for yourself, and then also blurring for how you started to identify the other people in the cast, because we would do these explorations and they got serious, they got heavy. Like we said, nobody hurt each other, but like, I mean, there is physicality. You saw in the videos that, you know, the choreography does include physicality. We were talking a lot more during our explorations, and they would finish. And in one of our weeks of rehearsing, we did not get a chance to kind of do an ending debrief. Let's clear the energy. Let's talk about what happened, which we would normally do. And everybody would hug each other and say how much they loved each other. And I'm sorry, and that's not what I mean. We had one day where we did not get to do that. And you could feel the difference in the energy. We were out of time. The next group for the studio had come in and we just had to leave. And we were left in this extremely tense high. And I can remember thinking to myself, like, for the things that had been given to me during that exploration, thinking, is that what they really think? Like, do they really think that of me? Is that how Roney really sees me? Is that how Tereka really sees me? Do they actually hate me? Like how am I seen? It was very difficult. So I found that lines were easy to be blurred for yourself, but also not really feeling that you knew where other people stood. So I will say for this work, communication after the fact is very, very key and necessary.
Communication is hashtag communication is key, right?
Yeah.
I love that you gave them that time, Esie, to explore the movement and even to investigate their own feelings through that. That's what I'm getting from you, Miranda, as you're sharing that investigation, that you were given the room to be able to do that.
We were, absolutely.
Yes.
I feel like the first couple of weeks, that's all it was. There was no creating, there was no choreography. We just came into the room every day and said, let's explore, let's see what happens. Let's see if we move one thing in this direction, let's see where it goes. Challenge yourself to pick a different route, but also at the end of the day, it has to be reflective of your experiences or it's not really going to be genuine. So we had that opportunity to be able to explore a lot, which is where so much of what you got to see in the final came from.
Well said. Thank you. And Celina, I'd also like to go to you because I'm also curious to know, as a new member coming in, how was it transitioning into an existing cast with already formed relationships? What was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thankfully, I've known Esie for almost 10 years, if not more, and I've been a fan of the show. I saw the last version of the show and was deeply moved by the show. I was actually really good friends with Allison, who was in this role as she was going through it. So full circle coming to this place was, I was in shock for a lot of the time as kind of like, how did I get here? But there wasn't enough time for me to be in shock and let that settle in because we had 3 weeks to get it done. So thankfully, I did have prior relationships, not super deep, but relationships with cast members who definitely made it easier for me to come in. But it was very challenging. It was very challenging. because you're always thinking you want to, you know, live up to the expectation, and there isn't a lot of time. So thankfully there was so much help and guidance from, you know, movement coaches and, you know, Jazz Fairy J, who was also working with us on just kind of developing our connection really fast. I found that really important for me as a new member. And, you know, it was like exercises like Miranda was saying, where, you know, sometimes I just had to lie on top of another body for 5 minutes, and that's what we did. But you'd be surprised at how much that will connect you to another person, like really quickly, when you don't have the luxury of time. So yeah, for me, it was definitely, I felt like I was doing this a lot, but it was like, it had to get done. And I'll never forget the first moment that I had like my own little breakdown. I think I was with Esie, and we just looked at each other, and I think I just started crying. It was funny that no one in the room was surprised, because they had already had their moment and their time with, you know, all of that. And I was just kind of like, so.
Experiencing it for the first time, kind of publicly among the group, but aside from the group. But it's great, I think, to also have someone in leadership who can guide you through that.
100%.
Right. So then in that respect, is there a similarity, would you say, between your character and your personality?
Definitely. And I really, the thing about Esie and the way that the work is done is it's like she can kind of see something in you that you almost don't see yet. So my guidance and the landmarks and the posts that I had to kind of go with my character, the more that I kind of delved into that, I was like, this is pretty similar. This is me. You know what I mean? Just in the nature of my character comes out of nowhere. Where does she come from? And she's trying to kind of explore this group, which is, you know, I'm mixed race, raised by a white mother. And it's like, where did I come? You're almost teetering on both sides. So it's as you start to go along, we start to see a lot of similarities that you really do see the blurred lines between your character and yourself. And, you know, the afterthought that I have, because, you know, I've been able to do the show twice, and I know I've only the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gone as deep as, you know, the other cast members for sure. But I think it's the ability to do this work through a character almost allows you to more safely explore things that you haven't confronted within yourself, because you're doing it through your character. But then you realize, like, you're also healing yourself at the same time, because the lines are essentially pretty blurred.
Right. So also, in addition to that, what about the relationships then? Were any of the relationships between characters similar to the relationships in real life? What's your opinion on that, Celina?
I know, like, and maybe Miranda can speak to this also, but I feel like the minute that we kind of announced that there were two Sands, it was like, you could feel it. And, you know, and I knew that it almost sensed like Miranda kind of was a little bit confused as to what was going on. And I think that like lived on in our interactions with each other, where we were kind of exploring that. So in that sense, I would say yes. And just even getting to know each person through their character. For example, with Esie, like my constant search to essentially have her approve of me or like me or get me on her side, and she is not having it. And, you know, there was nothing I could do, even as we were exploring. And even I think in the show, like, we got there, but I know that we're not there yet for real, you know, like as far as our characters go. So
there's always so much unpacking, I feel like can be done with a production like this. And I'm going to speak with you even more about that a little bit later in the show today as well, Esie, because it really does seem like a production like this can continuously grow and flourish in so many different directions because of what can be unpacked from it.
Sorry, I put myself on mute. Yes, definitely. No, definitely. And I think that's where I'm at right now. So I'm plotting and scheming, and I've told some of the cast about my plots and schemes, basically, in terms of, because this conversation is is needed. I've asked questions in terms of like what happens if this wasn't an all Black cast and it was like an all Filipino cast, if it was all, doing this type of deep work with other races, and being able to see that spectrum of races, because there's white passing individuals in almost every race. So I think it's necessary for us to be able to see how diverse this conversation of shadeism can be. And there's places that I want to take it that I'm not going to say, but there's definitely there's a many streams that I can take this one particular show, and I'm excited to drive it there.
Well, so are we. So are we. We're excited and we're waiting. And Celina, thank you as well for your share. We also want to take a moment to talk to the wonderful Roney. Roney is here with us. Roney Lewis, so good to see you. And Roney, hi. And Roney, what was the process like for you from the very beginning excerpt of Shades at Dance Makers in 2016 up until now? What was that like for you?
Well, first of all, that was so long ago, and Shades has transpired and evolved tremendously since then. I do remember the first time we did it. Esie had, I think, 3 sort of excerpts of shows that she wanted to do, and the topic of Shades was basically a last sort of excerpt that we did out of the 3, and then seeing the amount of feedback that we got from the audience, because it wasn't really a show, it was just more so like just like a presentation. A lot of people resonated really well with Shades, so that led Esie to kind of just further Shades and go really deep. So the first time we did it, it was basically just sort of surface. Like you had, your light skin, team dark skin, or team Jane and Weston, team Scarborough. Like, you know what I mean? So it was just super surface. We had never really gone deep, and I never really experienced, like, I knew what shadeism was, but I never really experienced it growing up, until I guess later on in life I was like, okay, you know what, that's what that was. Maybe I didn't know what it was before, but that's what that was. And then to finally, when we did a full length work of it in 2018, it was just like we came up with characters for ourselves, and it was just really interesting to just kind of act, but also bring in certain experiences that we had from our real lives. And so there was a lot of I guess passion. I would say there was a lot of passion. Some passion was mistaken for aggressiveness, Miranda. But for the most part, I think all in all, for the past couple years or so now, it's been deep work, and we definitely went below the surface to get the people talking, and to finally get to see what it is to really look at colorism and all that.
Yeah, it really sounds like to me that, even just watching how you gently and lovingly tease one another, that the relationships in this cast are quite spectacular. During the course of the creation process, straight through to the performances on stage, there's an intimacy that you all would have developed through this process. And have also had an opportunity really to be able to get to know different sides of that person that you knew before walking in the door. So this must have been, a drastic life event, really, for all of you, outside of really just experiencing just the dance, so to speak, or the artistic and creative part of that, so to speak. Celina, I'd love to hear from you on that, because I see you nodding. What are your thoughts on that?
Just that it's hard to put into words, because it's a whirlwind for me. Like, I just got swept up in this wave, and it really is like quick intimacy, connecting with people, feeling their pain, getting a lot of insight, because I'm coming in with the only views that I know, right? As a person of mixed race, as light skin, and really holding my own reservations. And then, we make it a point to sit down before we do anything and check in with each other and see how we're doing, how we're feeling, sharing stories. So to really hear of other people's experiences, you know, Asie's experiences with, you know, having light-skinned women chosen, like to hear those experiences, it changes everything, and you develop this kind of closeness that like you can't. I can't imagine another way to get that in such a short amount of time, even if it wasn't a short amount of time. It's
Even if it wasn't, right. And what are your thoughts as well, Miranda?
For sure. Like, you can't do a show like this, certainly not in the process that we do, without developing a connection with each other. I mean, every time we go through a rehearsal period of Shades, before we even get in the room the first day, we at some point get an email with a questionnaire that's like, you have homework. And you're like, oh my God. But it's, because we show up because we've got to start thinking about something that happened in our childhood. What are your views on this? Do you understand this? What have you in your experiences with this? Like I said, the beginning processes were never about, okay, let's try to shoot out some choreography. It was exploring. It was talking about our stories and sharing our experiences and learning to see the different points of views and the different experiences that we've had. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this project, is that it really gave a chance for a voice of all different viewpoints and experiences to be heard. And so people that you might not have thought have had a difficulty in something, you find out that they do. We all got a chance to become really intimate of people's experiences and the ways that they have grown and developed themselves as people and their identities with race brought into that. And also with all of processes, Esie, when you dance with Esie, is also somebody who, like Celina said, normally at the beginning of rehearsal, we do check-in, because beyond everything else that's going on for just the show, we're all people, we all have lives, we all have other things that are going on. So we will do a check-in, and you get to the point where nobody's putting up walls anymore. We get in and we're going, I'm having a day because this is happening in my life, this is happening, this is happening. I don't think there's been anybody who has not at one point broken down at some point during the rehearsal process because of what's going on in the process as well as what's going on in your personal life. And so you really do become connected as a group, as friends. We do exercises to become connected through our bodies, through our emotions, through word, through movement, through spirit. And so, like we always say, the love is real, and it is. Like we play around. Roney, I love you. And
Love you too.
we're brothers and sisters. We make fun of each other and we laugh at each other and we dance to soca together and we catch a bubble and a wine during rehearsal and then we continue on with what we have to do. So the love is real with Shades. The love is real.
I love it. I love it. And I can feel that love in this room. And I just want to also remind our listeners, we're here live for you. I'm Nicole Hamilton here with Turnout Radio with the cast of Shades. And we want to invite you, ask those questions. This is your opportunity. Please share them with us. I want to thank you, JJ Wong, who is listening and watching it right now. JJ Wong had shared that I watched the show. It was and is an amazing and powerful and thought-provoking experience. Thank you to Esie and all of the cast of Shades. Thank you for that comment, JJ Wong. Continue to send in your comments and questions. We would love to be able to hear what they are. So send them on in. Again, another reminder as well, donations can be sent to e-transfers, can be sent to info@asiemensah.com and paypal.me/ACMensah. Esie, I'm sitting here and I'm laughing internally and externally as I'm enjoying, the camaraderie among your cast. And we're going to be bringing on some more members in just a moment. But any last words for this particular group before we escort them backstage?
I guess for me, it's just like, now you gotta make me think. I guess, is there a moment for any of you that you would want to either push the envelope even more, or that you felt was too much in the current production of the work? Is there a moment that you're just like, yeah, that part went a little bit too far for me, or I could actually push this moment further. Roney.
You've got the microphone, Roney.
I know, right? That's a really good question. I think, I think for me, I guess the moment where there's an issue that Tereka, I guess, ends up in the center, in the middle, and she's like really forced to pick a side. I think during that moment, because we rarely see, you know, that brown skinned person, you know, having the choice to pick a side. It's always, you know, they always end up on one side. But I would definitely expand on that just a little bit more, and just get more of the different sides pulling her to our side, and what is the reason, like why do we want her on our side, you know? So I would definitely expand on that. Pretty much everything else, it's always intense. So I love things intense. So, you know, people go there. So there's nothing that I would pull back, but I would definitely say we can elaborate on just maybe that moment in particular too. Yeah.
I definitely agree. This was you ended the video just, and I was gonna tell you, I was like, can we keep that moment? And then I was just like, but there's a moment in the show that where we ended off in the video where Tereka's in the middle and she's circling because Shakeil, he kind of drew the line, and that was the first time that you really see the separation between light skin and dark skin with the cast until that moment. And that moment actually happens about, I would say, maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes into the show. The show's only 65 minutes. So you go through a huge chunk of the show just experiencing these bodies and experiencing this energy. And then Celina tips the scale, and then Shakeil comes in, and you know, the moment where you know, this is where I have to thank Samson, because it was when we wanted to see Shakeil as an ancestor. I'm playing the idea of the fact that, like, and at the very beginning of the show, he's the one that's kind of calling everybody in, that calls these 5 individuals that start the piece. And so when he reappears to be the last person that enters, it's about the thought of, like, the ancestors already know what the story is. And they know that since we've already been choosing to go down this road, we have to live out that decision. And it kind of feels like what's happening right now in the world and the trajectory of the world, in terms of the fact that once we started to then favor certain complexions over the other, we now have to live out the repercussions of that decision. And so we give, where Shakeil comes in with love, we gave him so much hate based off of how Celina felt about his entrance and not wanting to lose her position. So we gave Shaq all of this hate, and he retaliated. And he didn't, you know, where we did the kind of the same thing to Miranda by just leaving her, she didn't retaliate. We, you know, where Shakeil, he did, and ended up, his venom ended up kind of really spewing in the show, and then was the cause of a lot of other downturns to happen. So it's really interesting. And I could go on for about those moments forever, but I want to hear what the other 2 ladies have to say.
Feel free to share.
Well,
we want to hear you.
I would think for me, one other moment, well, I will say 2 moments. Well, one moment that has nothing to do with me, but after there is that kind of divide in the cast, once Russ does make that decision to go to Team Light Skin, as we call it, you didn't get to see in the video, but then begins the process of the darker side of the cast dismantling, the anger that goes on there, and Cole and Clay deciding to move over to the other side of, move on to the other side of the stage and join the light skin. And for me, I would love for that moment to be more developed. I feel like it happens very fast, and sometimes it's just that, you know, we have time restrictions, so that's what we have to do. But for me, I would love to kind of see more of the development of that, of what really would make them tear away and choose to move over and kind of leave Esie to leave Tar by herself. And then beyond that, for me, I've just always felt, I think in general, this topic is just so huge that it always feels like we need another 2 hours for the show. So I know when we got to the point, again, that you don't see at the end, where Tar discovers basically powder representing bleaching cream and begins to bleach her skin, and begins to walk through the cast now also as a new self-proclaimed Sand. I can just remember when it was like, they were like, and then that's the end of the show. And I remember being like, what? like, what do you mean? That's just where we're cutting it. That's it. That's what's going to happen. And so for me, it's not so much that there's a part of the show that I feel like needs to be developed, so much as it just never feels like it's time for it to be over. Like, it's like, what happens next? Like, where does it go next? So there is a part of me that for sure would love somehow for Shades to become some 2.5 hour, like Asie's like, got plans.
Well,
Make
that's-
notes.
But yeah.
I know, I am. And I'm about to take off my phone to actually really take notes, because this is the nature of the conversation. People don't believe me when I tell them. I was like, I did a workshop at Canadian Stage this year about radical vulnerability and kind of working through the process of building Shades and doing that with different races. And I said, he was like, how much time do you need? I said 3 hours. And then I got 2, and I was like, I don't think you guys know. It's like, I'm trying to really fight against people, because it's just like, you need the time. You need the time to be able to settle into it as an audience member, to digest it, because it's a heavy piece. You know, things don't really go awry until 45 minutes into the show. And the show now is 65 minutes. When we did it originally, it was 75. But when we did the Fall for Dance North show last year, I had to shave down 10 minutes, which really feels like I'm pulling out my teeth, because it's just like, why do I need more time? I don't need less time. But when you're thinking about presenters, and when you're thinking about touring the work and having an intermission, not everybody wants an intermission. You know, there's a lot of other factors as a producer that needs to evolve, you know. And thank you, Carolyn, for suggesting feature film. It's all on the list. It is all on the list of things. And that's the reason why, is because the conversation can't just end with this show. It has to continue. So I need to find other avenues and other ways to be able to continue it.
Okay, so it sounds like not only do you have notes, but lots of work that's ahead of you. Right.
It's not ending. It's not ending.
It's not ending. And speaking of not ending, the comments that are coming in are not ending. Thank you so much to all of you. Carolyn says, feature film things. I'm assuming that's for you, Esie. Feature film things. Pardon me. Yes, feature film things. Also, Carolyn also shared so much to process, of course, which is understandable. So much to process and sink in with regards to today's talk, and of course, Shades. Now, we had a question before we let all of you, or this first group, go. We had a question from Elizabeth, who asked that it just interested if any of the cast members had previous shadeism prejudices that got dismantled in this process. That's coming from Elizabeth. Any thoughts from any of you?
I'm throwing it to Celina.
Yeah, I think if it's the same thing that you're thinking, for me, being light-skinned, I definitely have always felt, you know, from my darker-skinned friends, that there's always a level of, not necessarily shade, hate, whatever it is, but there's always some kind of something that I felt like was being projected onto me, that I've done wrong, that I just didn't understand. Like, I've done something wrong for existing, and I just never understood it, and it almost made me really defensive. And it truly wasn't until this process and really working through my character with Asie's character, and just hearing stories, that I truly understood and became much more aware of the privilege that I hold being a light-skinned person. That realization of that privilege then weighed me down with a lot of guilt, and then working through that, because it's like, what can I do, you know? And just having those discussions with Esie, for example, and like, we both need to understand what we need from each other, you know? So as far as dismantling, I mean, there's obviously still so much work You know, I just know what I can do as far as making space and things, but that was a really big thing that happened for me that I'm happy that it did, where it changed from defensiveness to now a different level of understanding.
Wow, well said. Yeah, and I think that it's in fact, I know it's so powerful that you would recognize that and that you would say it out loud.
It's
Because
not
I,
easy.
pardon me?
Sorry to interrupt. It wasn't easy to admit out loud.
Ah, I can imagine. Yeah, because I think, and this is something that Esie, you and I have spoken about before, that admission of I have privilege. So hearing you say that out loud, Celina, is quite powerful.
Because one of the things for me is that I had to acknowledge, just as a dark skinned woman, it's like I hold privilege, because like society likes to tell me that I have like none whatsoever. But it's like I actually hold privilege. My skin, I was like, I'm the source of the world. All life came from me. My melanin eats up the sun. Like all of those things that for some people are just, they want to repel. For me, it's like I want to celebrate. Yes, you may think that it's because I'm dark that you might have a prejudice towards me, but I don't necessarily have to ascribe to it. Like I can actually be whole in myself and exist in that space and exist in my beauty and know that that is enough. You know, it's really interesting, because I think when we are constantly looking at light skin being better, light skin being better, light skin being better, we never get a chance to really hone in on what it means to be a dark-skinned woman. What is the beauty that resides in that? So I wanted to challenge everybody to be like, what are your privileges and what are your disadvantages? We all have them. And I don't think that we actually pay attention to that enough.
Well said, Esie. Thank you for that. And thank you to all of you. It's been so wonderful sitting here, speaking with you and seeing your beautiful faces on screen. I hope that we get the opportunity to see each other in person one day very, very soon. So I want to thank each of you again for joining me on the show, joining Esie and I on the show. Such a pleasure sitting down with you. Miranda, Celina, Roney, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And of course, we are going to be sitting down with more of Esie, talking about all things shades. We invite you, please continue to keep sending in those questions. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear about all that you have to share with regards to not only the production, but any intimate questions that you have for Esie, for the cast members, for each of them. Please be sure to send them in now. We want to hear from you. Esie, we do have a comment that I also wanted to share from, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Pascaline.
Yeah.
Pascaline says, your work deserves an ongoing series that could go beyond dance and theater with an access online to educate and inspire. More than ever, your voices and expressions must be heard.
It's well, I'm happy that everybody is in the similar vibration that I am in, because it's wonderful. But yes, the education part is a huge thing, because understanding how necessary it is to have these conversations. I believe that for me, when you're talking about shadeism and you're talking about education, Miranda just said it, education for the youth, because you are dealing with this at a very young age. There are children that are being told that they are too dark, that their grandparents won't touch them because they're darker than their siblings. There are issues that happen where, you know, parents will come and try to flatten out your nose, will tell you to stay out of the sun because they don't want you to get darker, or, you know, just complete favoritism. So we need to attack that, because as a child, you don't understand when that happens. You understand it as an adult, if you do. But if we don't start to look at what is actually happening to our children that experience shadeism, because you experience that as a child, and then you either come to or not understand it as an adult. So I think it's very, very necessary that education really needs to be a part of this. And that's a part of the stream that I'm trying to develop. So if there are educators, I'll just throw it out there. If there are educators that are educators, my partner is an art educator. So I also want to see how we can actually bring this into museums or just, workshops for kids in terms of exploring their skin, exploring their beauty, and exploring the conversation of how they might feel disenfranchised at a very young age, and navigating that conversation if they go home, and home is the space of where they're actually receiving that hate. How do you navigate that? How do you remind yourself that you're beautiful? I think that to me is the hardest thing, because it goes unspoken and everybody just expects you to be like, oh, well, you're beautiful, so why do you feel that way? But they don't understand. As a dark-skinned woman, when you feel like everybody around you, all of your friends, because I grew up with a friend that was very fair-skinned, and a caramel-complected friend in high school. My best friends, Tiffany and Cami. And then we got into university, and my girlfriends, I was the darkest one amongst those group. And then the same thing happened again when I got into the industry. I kept feeling like I was the darkest one amongst all of my friends, and therefore my interaction with men would be minimal. And then, or because of that prejudice that I decided to play into, that was the only thing that I see. So if men did give me attention, I didn't pay attention to it, because I was like, well, you talk to her over me, so that's what it is. That's my reality. Nobody wants me. So you have to reprogram yourself. And if we can start to reprogram ourselves when we're 10, when we're 5, as opposed when we're 35 and we're wondering why we don't have a partner, and we're wondering why all of these things are happening to me and what it is that I'm doing to continue the cycle. We have to really be willing to dismantle the whole entire system, because to me, it's like, as parents, and this is now dealing with Toronto as a mixed race city, as parents, if your child is a different shade of you, if this is an interracial couple, and I know both Miranda and Celina spoke to it, it's just like, are you having conversations about race? Are you having conversations about the potential prejudice that is possibly present in your family that you may not even really discuss? Does your family even like Black people? These are all beautiful questions that I think that people really need to ask, because when your children end up being Black or half Black, they end up having to navigate that prejudice that they feel from a family. It's just like, and what is those mothers' intentions and even wanting that Black body? It's just like, there's so many layers to it, because then that all gets put into your children. And then your children are now having to navigate, what am I doing with parents that are dealing with this? And this is like, and you see, to me, it's just like, it's a kind of like a textbook situation with all of these different children that don't get a chance to have a real conversation. Let's have a real conversation. Let's have a real conversation if my siblings are of different shades than my other siblings. I'm the darker one, and my other 2 siblings are lighter than me, and how my family reacts to the lighter skinned one versus me. Let's talk about this, because when we think about it, yes, we're thinking about society, but it also hits close to home. And this was something that I remember saying a lot in the first show when we did it in 2018. I'm like, people have to understand, it's like, you have to take responsibility. The way that we choose to act and react to our children, our friends, our family, our loved ones, that's our responsibility. We can't blame everything on society and white colonialism and supremacy and all of that stuff. We have to be willing to take responsibility to break the cycle.
Oh, well said, Esie. Thank you. And on that note, we're going to take a break right now here on Turnout Radio and be back with more of you, Esie, and members of the cast. Thank you. We'll be back right after this.
CIUT 89.5, Toronto.
We're back on Turnout Radio right here on CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm going to be rejoined very shortly by Esie Mensah and more members of the cast. I wanted to invite you again to please send in those questions. I'd love to hear from you. The cast would like to hear from you. We have so much that are coming in right now. Thank you to Zara. I see a comment coming in from Zara. Zara had shared that we forget the youth go through this and don't understand it and know how to address it. So a piece like Shades is needed. Highly agree. Highly agree. And also feel free to drop those comments with regards to how we can engage our youth, how we can, especially given the fact that so many youth will have questions with regards to shadeism, with regards to colonialism, and they're coming in with a misunderstanding sometimes as to what those things are. So drop your comments. Would love to hear what those are with regards to how to approach our youth and have those discussions with them. Carolyn, thank you for your comment as well. Carolyn shared, who do we feel is missing from these shadeism conversations? Great question. Who would we like to see more of, and who isn't here? Who do we wish when looking into the audience there would be more of? That's a great question. We're going to send that off to Esie as well. Would love to hear her thoughts with regards to that when she rejoins us. And Miggy, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Miggy? Miggy has said, thank you so much for bringing education as a focus, especially because education has been mobilized to erase these conversations, to protect these symptoms. We need to disrupt with our everyday actions. Brilliantly said. Thank you for that share as well. Esie Mensah is going to be joining us very shortly in just a moment with more talk on shades and shadeism. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, you can learn more about this show, Turnout Radio, at turnoutradio.com. Be sure to visit us there. You can also capture past interviews with Esie as she speaks on shadeism as well. And again, she'll be joining us very shortly. For those of you who are also have uncomfortable questions with regards to shadeism, we invite you as well to send a private message. You can send it to us at Turnout Radio. You can also send it to Esie Mensah. We will, throughout this broadcast, continue to keep putting up links as well as handles where you can send those messages to. Because sometimes the uncomfortable questions are ones that we don't want to ask publicly. So thank you again to each of you for sharing those questions. Esie Mensah is going to be joining me now. I'm going to welcome her back to the show. Esie, hi.
Hi.
So Esie, Esie, yeah, I noticed that. I was going to say it's like I'm at the academies. I love
I know. I'm sweating.
I love the fact that you've had a costume change.
It was underneath. I just took my jacket off, but yes, I'm sweating.
Well, where was my opportunity for a costume change?
We'll
I want to Diana Ross it up too on this show. But I want to, of course, welcome the next group of artists, Esie, who are going to be joining us today. Samson, Percy, Tereka, Shakeil, they're all going to be joining us now. And I'm so excited because many of these individuals I had known prior to the show, and then getting a chance to see them present on stage was a totally different thing. So coming in right now, Percy, welcome to the show. Percy is coming in right now. Hi, Percy. Great to see you.
Sorry, I have to unmute my mic. How you guys doing?
That's okay. Great to see you, Percy. Samson is also going to be joining us as well. Samson, welcome to Turnout Radio. Great to see you with us. And also Tereka. Tereka is joining us live here on Turnout Radio. Tereka, welcome to the show.
Afternoon.
Great to see you. And lastly, but of course, the amazing Shakeil. Shakeil is joining us here live as well on Turnout Radio. Welcome. Welcome, Shakeil. So, lots to unpack with this group as well. Samson, I'd like to start with you. When we look back at Shades and we look back at your performance, how has working on Shades in particular affected your spiritual practice?
Well, first of all, I hope
and
I don't have...
You're muted. There you go.
Okay. I hope I don't have too much feedback. I'm not one of the cast members, so I'm never on stage. So nobody ever sees me. I'm typically in the back. I'm in rehearsals. I'll stage manage at times, and I'm moving more into just doing a spiritual advisor role with the piece. I mean, shadeism has affected my life like it's affected many people's lives. How it's affected my spiritual practice. I realized that in the work with Shades, I came in initially as a stage manager, and then my ancestors continued to drive me forward in how I worked with Esie and how I worked with this piece and with the cast on this piece. And so it drove me to realizing things about myself and about my spiritual practice and what I wanted to do and what role I was supposed to have within the artistic world. So it's less about being on stage. It's less about being a stage manager. It's more about holding space for artists and their spiritual bodies through the processes of these kinds of shows. Mm-hmm.
Were there challenges in that, though, Samson, in operating and standing in that space?
It's a lot. It can be a lot to. It's hard enough as an individual to hold space for oneself. To then hold space for others can be even a bit more challenging. And then the more people you add into the room, the more bodies that you are holding space for, the more challenging it becomes. But it's important to know how to ground yourself, how to center yourself, how to care for yourself throughout the process so that you don't lose yourself in the midst of it and that you're still able to hold space. So it's a responsibility that I value, I treasure, and I'm grateful for. And I don't know what I would do if I wasn't doing that in the room.
Okay, so it seems like it was just the perfect role for you in this particular case.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Well,
definitely.
I'd like to thank you for that, Samson. And I'd also like to go to you, Percy, as well, because the first question for you in particular is why? Why are women of color mainly affected by shadeism or colorism than men of color? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, initially, whenever I asked that question, what was happening in the world was a little different, to be honest. But I'm going to go with my initial thought. I feel like as Black men, we're more so silent about the issues that are happening around our culture. I know for me, how I grew up, I was raised with kind of the notion of not to see color. And so until I started this process, I wasn't necessarily to a degree thinking about these situations as much as I did. I just thought they were normal, to be honest. But I noticed the Black women around me, like AC, even my sister, were more so affected by it than I was. And that was the question I was asking in my head.
So then what about in particular, when we think about that and we explore that just a little bit further, why does skin shade equate then to the beauty within a racial group?
Speaking honestly, I feel like it has to do with the systemic racism that was put in place. As we know, this world is made for the white male. And I say white male in particular because, I mean, women have less of a degree in in whatever they're doing. And so in our case, as Black people in our community, the closer you are to the white side, the more advantages and more opportunities you have, and the more people think you look beautiful. And like for me personally, growing up, because I was darker, I didn't feel as if I was that beautiful or that good or nice or appealing to look at until I got older and realized who I was and realized like what my shade and color holds It holds a lot of power. It holds a lot of knowledge. It holds a lot of strength, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, and I think that that's a journey right there, Percy. Right, getting to that place of personal acceptance. Right. Do you think a lot of that journey, or a lot of that, the arrival, I should say, of that acceptance, that a great part of it arrived during the process of Shades?
Yes, it did. um, During that time, I was actually in an interracial relationship, and the first uh, the first process that we had was tough for me because here we are dealing with shadeism, and I'm over here like I felt almost like a traitor in a sense. I'm just speaking honestly because I'm sitting in front of Esie, Tereka, um, I think Sammy was there, and just like women of color, and they're speaking on their issues. And I think AC brought up a point about how she feels as if whenever like men, like our men, black men, whenever she's like out and about with like a lighter skinned female, they naturally gravitate towards the lighter skin. And for me, I was just like, I had to ask the question to myself. Now, why do I choose that as well? Like, what do I not see in a darker skinned woman, a woman that looks like me, that I cannot appreciate, take care of, or love? And it was a journey for me, man.
Well, that's I think that right there leads me to a question, Percy. You've just you've caused an explosion to happen here, because one of the questions that have come in, and this has come in quite a few times from at least 7 different viewers, with regards to the interracial relationship piece. The question is there anything wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with a black man dating a white woman?
When the black male is doing it for certain reasons, like maybe trying to get ahead in the community because they know because of their skin color how they were treated, they don't want that maybe for their kids. And if they're doing it in a sense where they're just trying to, I saw a video on Instagram where there was a bunch of black men sitting at a table, they're on vacation, and they were basically like cheering to more light-skinned kids. And I was looking at it and I'm like, what type of trauma did they go through for them to even say that or even think that? Like, why do they feel like they have to create light-skinned kids just so that maybe they can be at peace, or maybe they don't have to fight? Why are they taking the easy route?
Why are they taking the easy route? Okay, I feel like this topic, and I see some of you nodding, and even those who are backstage, who are also a part of the cast, are responding to this, because that's a very heavy topic when it comes to interracial relationships. And I think that particular conversation ends up birthing other conversations, focused as well and directing back to shadeism. So part 2 on that, Percy, wait to be invited back to Turnout Radio to talk about that in particular, because that is such a heavy topic when it comes to the interracial piece and why we do the things we do, who we are dating and why we are dating them, the purpose and intention behind that. So part 2, you can wait for that, folks. That's coming to Turnout Radio. Percy is I'm voluntolding him, if that's even a word, and voluntelling you that you're coming back to Turnout Radio to talk about that. Percy, thank you for that share. Tereka, I'd love to go to you now to talk about the challenging aspect. And in particular, to talk about what the most challenging aspect was when you were performing in Shades.
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. I think the hardest part was reconciling finding a voice for my character and acknowledging how that reflected on me as a person, perhaps. I think I'm usually very comfortable with embodying a character, but because we were building these characters and these ideas from scratch, really, and obviously channeling our own experiences and channeling our own perceptions of the world and what we know and understand about colorism or shadeism, from the experiences that we're talking about in the space and outside in our homes. I thought, okay, well, I understand material. I understand what we're trying to say. I understand what we're building. But when it actually came to, articulating that through movement or the few words that we had, phrases, I sometimes felt stifled and unable to move and immobilized. And I realized it was reflecting the deeper essence of the character and what it meant to be stuck in the middle and what that does to your body and your ability to move freely, which is the language that we're using to tell the story primarily. So I realized that was probably the hardest thing, but then it really helped open up the layers of the character and let me understand that I was representing the middle and how hard it is to understand what the middle is, means, and feels like.
Ah, right. So then as you were continuing to ask yourself those questions then, Tereka, what lessons or even thought-provoking questions do you think your character presents to people, especially young people, watching and contemplating colorism?
Okay, so, and I don't think this is controversial to say, but I want us to start considering, so ultimately Russ chooses a side, right? She chooses to go to the lighter skinned group of people on the stage. And that is a catalyst for a lot of hurt, a lot of trauma for Tar. And, it kind of moves the show into this darker place. And when I think about that, especially for younger people, but people in general, what would have happened if Russ chose not to choose a side and just acknowledged who she was in that moment, and then that was good enough, and that she didn't have to place herself on either side to legitimize her reality. And I think back to Sand, number one, Miranda, and her character, that she was able to coexist as a lighter skinned person in this group without seeing herself as outside. Now, I do believe that it is important to acknowledge that there are differences. And I think there are a lot of parallels with the conversations that are happening around race in the larger community in the world. This idea that we don't want white people, for example, to say, I don't see color. We want them to see our color and acknowledge us as who we are, right? And I think that can be applied within our community, right? There are Black people that do not have the opportunity to choose. They never will, right? They're Black and they'll be Black until the day that they die. And that's okay. And there are also mixed race, biracial, multiracial people that are a part of the Black community because of their Black heritage, but they do have that option. And I think it's important for darker skinned people, Black people who cannot choose, to allow them to speak their truth and feel like they can acknowledge all parts of themselves without being asked to choose. And also, people who are in the middle acknowledging that and not, invalidating parts of themselves. So I think that's kind of the message that I would want for young people, because as we move forward, we're having more and more mixed race children being born. And unlike mixed race people of the past, who may not have direct connection with their ancestors who are not Black, and therefore by default, because of the one drop rule, identified with their Blackness solely and entirely, there are more and more people who are raised with their white parents or raised with parents of other races. And so it's really important, I think, for young people to maybe see in a character like this that what I did was, created in a theatrical context and drove a story forward. But the story could have been different had I made a different decision. And I think for the future of the conversation of colorism and shadeism, that could mean not choosing in that way, but grounding yourself and acknowledging who you are and all of who you are, because we don't choose to be born and we don't choose to come in the world as we are, and we are multifaceted, and that's okay.
Mm. Well said. Esie, what are your thoughts on that? Because there's so much depth to that. And it actually lends to, Tereka, when you were speaking about our young people, it lends to some of the comments that have been coming in as well, and how we speak to our young people about this topic. So thank you for that share, Tereka. What are your thoughts, Esie?
I think there's power in empowering our own voices. And, in terms of Tereka just saying that, like, what happens if I didn't have to choose a side? There's this idea that if you don't choose a side, then you're going to be left out. When I first brought Tereka into the piece, I was like, yeah, you're going to be on team light skin. She was like, Erks? I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you're lighter than me, so therefore you're light skin. It's like, it depends. Everybody's vision of where they fall on the spectrum really differs, and how they identify themselves versus how others see them is also a big change too. So I think that it's really being able to feel like I can just exist as I am without having to ascribe to anybody else's point of view of me, and that is enough. And how do I then maneuver if I don't need to pick a side? Obviously I needed her to, in order for show purposes and in order to push the narrative forward. But it's also something to actually say, what happens if she didn't choose a side? How would that push the narrative forward? What would happen? Can she be on an island all by herself, because she falls within this thin line between those that are not quite dark and not quite light, and those that are within the middle shade? That's a shade that nobody talks about. And every time we bring it up, everyone was like, thank you for acknowledging the middle people, those that live in the center line, that can't really choose. I'm not quite dark enough to be dark skinned, and I'm not quite light enough to be light skinned. So but being able to empower, again, what we were saying earlier, our differences, empower our voices as we are, empower our bodies, our shade as we are, without having to feel like we have to congregate together. That congregating together is also still separating us. So we want to be able to exist with 7 individuals on stage in our differences, and be able to see our beauty, and not be able to sit there and be like, you're technically not on my team. To me, it's everything's kind of going back to that source of unity.
Right. Wow. I feel like I'm sitting in university right now. There's so much information, and important and needed information, that we are discussing today. And I'm so grateful again that all of you have joined me today on this stage. Thank you as well to those of you who are sending in your questions. The cast is going to be answering. We're going to get to as many of those as we can momentarily. And I want to take this opportunity as well to speak to Shakeil, because Shakeil, what I'm curious to know is, what was the most surprising about the process thus far for you? And you're on mute, so we're going to bring you back. Take yourself off mute.
Can you hear me
Thank
now?
you. Now we can hear you.
For me, something that actually hit me yesterday that was really surprising is how this process has become a part of my life, and how my character and myself are starting to come into line with each other. Because let me just give you the emotional arc of Oak. He comes in giving love, receives a bunch of hate, and then acts out in any way imaginable that is like, you're close to me, you're gonna get hate. You're over there, you're gonna get hate. And I'm starting, because of what's going on in the world right now, to actually experience that level. And it's actually surprising because people who know me know that I'm the first one to crack a joke in the room when it gets serious. I'm the first one to like lift people up. But to actually now see the parallels between this character that I've been portraying for 3 or so years and things that I thought I was acting out that I could never actually, truthfully, I didn't feel that I could fully embody this character. But now I'm surprised at how, because of the way the world is now, I'm actually starting to feel similarities to that experience. And it's very interesting because I'm still sorting through that. So now I'm looking back to my experiences through the process and how that can heal me as a Black body in space right now. And I'm just really looking at the real world applications of what I've been learning throughout this show and how I can apply that to the way I'm feeling right now. And through that, also how I can share my thoughts and opinions and feelings in a way that is informative and successful towards the success of not only this community, but like my mom has been calling me, the human community, like the human race as a whole, because what's going on is like, there's so much built up. So for me, like the most surprising thing is just how much this is applying to my life as I live it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you've shared that as well, because can the others, can all of you actually share the same? Have you found that for each of you, and actually I'll start with you, Esie, have you found that Shades has changed you? Have you found that?
I'm like, I'll let you finish your sentence. But yes, it's changed my life entirely. It it gave me a perspective I had no idea that I could ever achieve on a subject like this. I never knew that I would be able to have such insight on life, on experiences, on acknowledging and empowering other people's experiences as well. I think that there's so much beauty in that, being able to look at my sisters and look at my brothers and be able to say, yes, I see you. How can we bring you out? And because I work from such a spiritual, ancestral way, that really gave me guideposts. We would be moving forward and they would be putting guideposts. They would put guideposts and I'd be like, okay, so guys, this is where the show has to go. Okay, this is where it needs to go. Or this is where it needs to move. And I said this, I think I said this to Miranda recently, Miranda or Celina, and I had said, stepping back after the show, I learned how it is that I actually created the show after I've created it. It wasn't something that I fully understood in the moment of actually creating the work. I actually understood how impactful the work was after the fact, and that was a huge thing, to be able to lay in a space of trust, lay in the space of trusting the ancestors to be able to guide me, because they knew. It's like my higher self, my future self knew what it was that the pathway that I was going to be on. So it was giving me those guideposts. And then I also didn't realize that in creating those guideposts that I was also bringing in information from each of their spirits as well. So that's why in some ways everybody's character in the show actually is a part of their own life story, which is an also really interesting thing. It's so beautiful to be able to allow myself to release into that. I've had to heal. I say I'm healing myself 10 times over every time I have to dive into this work. Even healing myself tonight, hearing everybody's story, because it's so affirming to remind yourself that it's needed, and that through this work that I was not only able to heal myself, but also these individuals that chose to walk on it with me.
What are your thoughts on that, Samson? Did you feel that as well? Operating in the space that you did can we unpack that a little bit more with you? Did you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first and foremost, I'm a healer. That is what I do. I'm a traditional healer. I'm a Sangoma, which is a South African diviner and healer. So the work that I do is entirely ancestral driven. So it's through that I'm able to assist in spiritually holding space for people, and to assist them in their own healing in the ways that they specifically need healing. So with this show, seeing, and I've been there for every iteration, in different facets, and to watch the show grow, progress, see the characters come in, see different people join the process, and some others leave the process, based off of schedule, timing, whatnot, and what is being asked by the show. It's interesting to see, and for how it affected me. I healed my own issues with shadeism in my own life, but it also taught me. There's a word in the spiritual community that a lot of people use where they say download, where they like to say that they've downloaded information. I don't particularly use that term download because for me, my ancestors, I don't see my ancestors as living outside of me. My ancestors are within me. So they just continue to feed me information that I need to know. So when I'm in the room and I'm in the space, they're feeding me information that I need to know about each person. And sometimes it's information that they didn't think that I would know about them. Sometimes it's information that, like Esie said, she didn't realize about the show. And so it comes through as to what it is that the work needs. So with Shades, the show itself, it exists as its own energy. It exists as its own entity. It has its own life force. It has its own thing that it's asking of every person that comes in contact with it. It has its own thing that it is telling us that it needs. And all we can do and all we should do is listen and respond to that. Often when we try and tell an outside force, an outside thing, what it is that they are, what we're trying to decide or control what it is, we often meet resistance, and we're not sure how to handle that resistance. And the more we work in conjunction with something, it becomes a lot easier for us to breathe through it and learn and grow in the ways that we need to organically. So I think it's a beautiful thing to watch every one of the dancers come into the piece and do what they need to do and learn what they need to do, and to support them in that process and to watch those things shift and change and how to hold space. There were often times where I might come into rehearsal and I might bring a gift for the cast that they weren't expecting me to bring in, and without knowing what it is and why it is that they needed that. So I might come in with a stone that, a person needs that another person might not need, and each person gets something different because that's what their ancestors are telling me that they need. So you bring that into the show and into the room, and it helps ground people in different ways. So that's also a beautiful thing to see exist, and then how that translates onto the stage is wonderful.
Thank you, Samson. It sounds like this presentation, this production, this showing of Shades has elevated all of you in so many different ways. Why was I not in Shades is what I'm asking myself right now. But it sounds like it's elevated all of you to so many different levels. And the fact, one of the things that I think about as I listen to each of you talk is, with what each of you received from Shades, you are now going out there and sharing it with so many other different generations. So it's spreading like wildfire, the education surrounding shadeism. I really want to thank you to all of you for submitting and being so authentic in what you shared today. I'd like to also go to some questions, if I may, that our listeners are sending to us. Thank you again to those of you who are tuning in. You are wonderful. We love these questions. And forgive me for pronunciations. So I'm just going to go now to you, Akosua. Am I pronouncing that right?
Akosia.
Akosia.
She was, so this was Akosia, to give you backstory. She was the woman that helped me co-direct the work. She was with me in 2017, early 2018, when we did the full version at the Factory Theater. Her schedule conflicted, so she wasn't really with us as much with the 2019 version that we present, or that I presented today. But Akosia is a huge voice in the making of Shades. I just want to shout her out and say thank you, girl.
Oh, well, my apologies for pronouncing your name wrong. And AC, thank you for educating me. I'm going to say this again. Akosia.
Mm-mm,
Am I saying it right? No, I'm not. I'm struggling. I'm clearly struggling.
You
If
gotta
if
get the Ghanaian in the voice, boy. You gotta get the Ghana in the voice. Akosia.
Akosia.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Akosia. That's right?
Yes.
Okay, I've got the entire cast of Shades laughing at me right now, and I love it. But we're all family. We're all family. So I want to go to you and thank you for your question. And again, apologies for a mispronunciation. Thank you for your question. You shared my babies, you said. I love you all. My question is, what is the one thing you have learned about yourself as a result of working on Shades? That question for any of you, please. Don't all rush to the microphone at the same time. For any of you,
For myself, you can hear me, right?
we can.
uh, for myself, one thing that I've learned throughout the process is the fact that I subconsciously, but still actively, was desensitized to a lot of this. I actively stayed within my comfortable privileged circle of being the shade I am, raised in the communities that I was raised in. And like, to be honest, my family portrait looks like this right now. Like everybody from all types of shades, even to like white passing are in my family right now. And it was never a thing that was discussed or brought up. It was just assumed that, hey, you're my uncle, okay, Percy's my brother, cool. But now through working with Shades, I have learned that it is my role as a Black person and as a person in general to be aware of this, to be sensitive to it, and also call it out if I ever see any wrongdoings within it. And also, if I'm questioning things, to also ask questions. There's no harm in asking questions, especially during this climate right now. There's actually no shame in just turning to someone and being like, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" They may say no. That's totally valid. It's their choice if they want to answer. But if you're willing to learn and understand your surroundings, just continually ask questions and do the work yourself. So
Mm,
that's another thing that I've learned about myself is I ask questions, but I'm also willing to take those answers and carry them with me and then seek out other resources myself. So I guess I've learned to be more active
mm,
within my role in the Black community and understanding shadeism, understanding the vantage and the viewpoints of others and their experiences. And if I don't understand, to ask for better understanding, because it is very important that we don't live in this type of world right now, where
right.
it's just about me and my goal and that's it. It's very important to open that up and understand the struggles and also the successes and the values of others to better understand the environments that you inhabit. So,
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much, Shakeil, for your thought.
yeah.
AC, did I see you put your hand up? Did you have a
No, I was just giving him snaps.
all right. Two snaps.
Yes, plus
Two,
one.
three, four snaps. Thank you so much, Shakeil, for your share on that. And we also had another question from Patrick. Patrick is asking, is amplifying and sharing the conversation as an ally helpful? And he also says, insightful. This is really insightful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you to you, Patrick. That question to any of you. Is amplifying or sharing the conversation as an ally helpful?
I would love to answer that. I don't know if you can hear me.
We
Yes.
can.
Um, yes, I think it's super important to amplify this conversation to allies because allies often have children with Black people. And then there are, children who are going to be of those people and having to navigate the world and will be in Black spaces. Also, this idea, I think, so the cast knows I'm always on the internet reading and researching and looking up articles and abstracts from things and collecting information before I make statements because I'm like, what are people are having individual experiences all over the world, but when someone aggregates that data and kind of lays it out in front of you, then it's hard to deny it. And I think colorism is not just practiced inside, you know, a Black community or an Asian community, but it's also reinforced by white people, right? And people from outside of that particular community that it's happening in. And I think sometimes, again, for sake of, you know, for unity's sake or for community's sake, we act as though that I hear it all the time that, you know, white people see us all the same, right? And it's all the same, but it isn't. And there are statistics that show that, right? And again, I make sure I'm very careful when I say those things. So when we have those facts in front of us, then it is now for those people who are making those judgments to question why they're doing that and get to the root of that. So everybody having the conversation about colorism is super important because we all are responsible for holding up white supremacy and holding up these ideologies that are bringing down and hurting individuals within communities. And we all have to be a part of dismantling them. So everybody has to be a part of the conversation and find their in so that they can find their action.
Wow. Any other thoughts on that? That's good, Tereka. Thank you. Any other thoughts from anyone? No. Well, I do want to share a few more comments from the wonderful individuals who are tuning in. Brian, thank you for sharing your comment. Brian says, thank you all so much for this extremely helpful information to help educate me and other white people on how to actually be allies in the Black community. Thank you for your comment, Brian. It's needed. It's needed. And we've spoken before with regards to the fact that it shouldn't only be Black bodies in a conversation like this. So that's why it's really important as well that you share what you have, Brian. Thank you so much for your comment. We have so many more that are coming in, and and I'm laughing to myself because you all are extremely popular. It is a wonder that my computer has not caught on fire with the amount of comments that are coming in. Percy, I do want to go to you and let you know that a lot of our comments came in with thanks for your honesty and your share with regards to discussing and being a part of an interracial relationship. I think many were moved with regards to that in particular because it's not an easy share to give. So thank you to the many who had actually come in and shared that as well. This comment is coming from from Celina, who says, such a huge help to me. Thank you. And that, of course, was going to our other listener as well. So thank you, Celina, for sharing that comment. Any other thoughts from all of you before I do let you go? Yes, Esie, please do share.
I'm gonna poke just a little bit and just kind of bring back something that Percy had said earlier, and I know Shaq is also in an interracial relationship, and I don't know if it's also appropriate to bring Miranda and Celina in as products of interracial relationships, but the idea of I guess like the traitor. And it's like, are you portraying that idea that we feel like we're portraying the Black community if we date outside of the community? And I take it to like, you know, Childish Gambino, when he came out with This Is America, everybody was like, yes, 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 Childish Gambino. Then they found out that he was in an interracial relationship and it was just like, cancel. So I guess my question is like, can you not still be for the culture? Can you not still be pro-Black and be in an interracial relationship? What does that look like? Does it require that you have a woke partner? What are the requirements of that in order to feel supported in that? And if you don't have a woke partner, do you feel like you are betraying the community by choosing to have a partner that is not of Black Black complexion or the Black race? This is just a general conversation. Anybody can answer it, but these are just my thoughts.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Esie. And as you were talking, we wanted to also share some of the comments that were coming in with regards to that as well, and Percy's earlier share. So any one of you that can share with regards to that, and we will certainly bring in, I know you'd mentioned Miranda.
Mm-hmm. I
Esie?
just,
Yeah.
yeah, like I was just
Yeah.
saying, because they are both products, like Celina and Miranda, both have their parents are in an interracial relationship. So it's just understanding what that is, and if that's what they also ascribe to. Do they want to continue an interracial relationship, or are they looking for Black men? It's such a touchy subject within our
Right.
communities. And it's a subject that we don't discuss enough. We will throw fire, very, very. We will throw fire a lot. I know I've thrown fire, and not really care about who gets burned. But at the same time, it's really understanding like what is behind that. What is the seed of that in terms
Right.
of what it is that. What are we seeking from? Again, coming back to that idea, what are we seeking from the white community? If you're
Right.
going to be with somebody, if you're going to be in an interracial relationship, white or, POC.
Okay. Any of you can answer before? Yes, Percy, please do.
For me, to be honest, like if you're gonna be pro-Black, I don't feel like an interracial relationship is something that you're gonna be a part of, because to be pro-Black means you prefer Black people, right? So if you're in a relationship with someone that is not of the same color, it's kind of hard to stand by those people unless you do really have like a woke partner and a partner that is for your people. But then again, their experiences are different than yours, and they won't fully understand like what you actually go through or what you actually feel, or if you're in a situation and you feel some type of energy as if somebody is giving you or giving racism towards you, and you try to explain that to them, the connection kind of gets lost because they haven't really experienced that. So they can say, yeah, I understand, but it's hard.
Right. But can they really?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. For myself, who, yes, I am in an interracial relationship right now. It is about continuously having those discussions. For me, I refuse to be with someone who does not understand the statement when I look them down the eye and say, you know, I'm Black, right? And I feel like the partner, I am so blessed and honored right now to find someone in general who, regardless of where they're coming from, is willing to listen, open, actively listen to where I'm at, have those tough discussions. And also, like I've been telling a lot of white folk that have been asking me questions about this, as well as people who are not Black, I think it's really important to sit in the uncomfortable, because that's where progress begins. Because as a Black person, we don't have the privilege to be like, I'm out. We're living this right now. So to have someone that is willing to sit in it and do everything they can to support, they may not fully understand or comprehend, but to continually support, I acknowledge that. And yes, it has been hard at times, especially right now with everything going on, but I have fallen in love with a person, and it's, I'm not going to say, oh, I don't see color. I do acknowledge that there is a privilege divide, and there is a racial divide and everything like that. And, you know, I know there's many people out there who believe you can't be pro-Black and be in an interracial relationship, and that's their opinion and their reality. However, with mine, and especially with my family, if you saw the scope of my family, I do support people being in love. And I do support, you can love who you want as long as you're willing to put in the work to understand as deeply as possible who you're with. And I'm working through it right now. It's not easy. We're sitting in the uncomfortable, but right now, yes, I'm in an interracial relationship. I can say that. And I'm with someone who is willing, more than willing, to actively do the work in ways that sometimes it actually shocks me how far they're willing to go to understand, support, and be there. So, for example, like he has come with me to many discussions, as well as Black written work. He wants to support companies. He's the one who sends out and uses his privilege and resources to send out this chat to a lot of people to get donations going. He is more than willing to be supportive, and the first one to be like, how can I help? How can I be there? And for me, that's really important because it brings you back to when I was younger. My dad actually said, you know, you have to work harder, you have to be stronger, you have to be more than just to be in line with them. And I feel like in a relationship, you have to work harder, you have to be stronger, you have to do way more to just be with me. And I'm fortunate enough to find someone who's actually excelling those expectations. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you for that share.
Yeah.
And you know, it's really interesting to hear everybody's different response and also experience relative to this. And I'm so curious to hear what our listeners have to say as well. So continue to keep rolling in those comments. We'd love to hear from you, pardon me. And at this time, Esie, yes, Queen.
Yes, I want to hear what Samson has to say.
Samson.
Yeah, I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. So I think on this topic of being pro-Black, I think where a lot of people there's a lot of confusion is that to be pro-Black in and of itself is about specifically, it's about encouraging the economic growth and development of Black people as a whole, with a purpose of increasing the wealth and population of Black people, right, around the world. So that includes spending money with Black businesses, etc. You can be pro-Black, have a partner who is not Black, and still be focused on increasing the wealth of the Black community. What it does also mean is that part of being pro-Black means that regardless of who your partner is, you are not bashing other Black people because of your choice to be with somebody who's not Black. And I think that's where a lot of the issue comes in. So, for example, with Childish Gambino, as Esie mentioned and brought up, the conversation is very nuanced because it wasn't just that the fact that he had a partner that was not Black, which is why he got canceled. It's because of previous tweets that he had mentioned and things that he had talked about, and a lot of his own views towards Black women that he had previously had. That's where a lot of issues came up in terms of how he allowed his partner to speak to him, language that he allowed to use towards him, which is oppressive language and has a history of oppressing Black people. That is part of why he got canceled. So I think you can be with somebody as a Black person who is not Black. You can date somebody who is not Black, but is your partner, one, encouraging you bashing people who are also Black? Is your partner encouraging you to or discouraging you from spending money within the Black community? I think those are the things that kind of that also matter, and it's a very nuanced conversation. So personally, for me, I don't have a non-Black partner. I haven't had a non-Black partner that I've dated and had a relationship with. Would I? Possibly. I don't know. That at the present moment is not who my ancestors have placed in my path for me to fall in love with. But I think it's important when we seek out relationships, just like we seek out friendships, to find out exactly where people who are not Black in our lives place themselves and how they view us, our existence, our experience, and our community's survival. And I think that's an important part of the conversation that unfortunately goes missing a lot of the time. But I think it is a necessary part of the conversation. So that's my only little take on that.
Yes. And Tereka.
I just want to quickly tie this idea because it's slightly outside of the topic of colorism, shadeism, but it can tie back. And I think something that Samson brought up about understanding pro-Blackness in the scope of economics and supporting the Black community. And this is something that I'm acutely aware of with like experience and research, observing in particular the Caribbean community and looking at how wealth accumulation happens there. And a lot of the most powerful and influential people in the Caribbean are direct ancestors of slavers. right? And there is a stratified community of people who married amongst themselves to maintain wealth and power. And there's often color tied up into that. So I think when we are making choices about who we're with, we have to remember that as we pass on inheritances and, you know, economic power, land, businesses, that may not end up in the hands of Black people or people who are identified as Black in society. And so that's one of the things I think about when we talk about specifically being pro-Black with this title. I think that you can support individual Black people and support Black people, you know, in a systemic way and, you know, go out of your way to, you know, put, you know, money or support or, you know, your ear and your shoulder to Black people who are in need. But I think when we are looking at it, especially when we're coming back to colorism and seeing how sometimes power, money, and, you know, influence gets filtered to some people in our society because of the perceptions that we still have around color, we have to be aware that as we have relationships outside of other Black partners, that those people can then also, you know, accumulate that power because we are still living in a system that supports that. So it's a very complex and nuanced conversation. And again, depending on where you are in the world, you see the, you know, you see the fruits of that more or less. And it is hard to talk about. It is hard to talk about because as much as we're looking at it, you know, as people that fit into boxes or, you know, into certain camps, these are all individual people that have had individual lives. And I think this is the same thing that a lot of white folks, when they hear these conversations, they get uncomfortable because they're like, well, I had an individual life. I had an individual story. I've gone through struggles or X, Y, and Z. But it's really important to further conversations. We have to take our individual stories and selves out of it and look at the systemic, you know, effects of our individual choices, which is a
Yes.
really hard place to be and to live with. And it doesn't mean that we're bad people or we're making bad choices, but we are making choices that have reactions,
Indeed.
and
Indeed.
we have to be okay with that. So
Indeed. Thank you both for that share, both you, Samson, and Tereka, and you, Esie. I think you had a share that you also wanted to give. No? Okay. I thought there was.
Yeah, I'm good. I just wanted to
Oh,
make sure because there's certain people's voices that I wanted to make sure were heard. So I appreciate the
yes.
two of them speaking.
Well, thank you to all of you. And I would still, we can still definitely bring in Miranda and Celina, who have thoughts to share on this as well. I'm going to let you go, though. Those of you here with me, Percy, Shakeil, Tereka, Samson, thank you so much for joining me here on Turnout Radio and speaking your truth and being so open and sharing that so publicly. Thank you for being here with us. We're going to let you go at this time. Thank you. It's
Thank you
been a
for having
pleasure.
us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And Esie and I are going to remain with you for our listeners, and we're going to bring in now both Miranda and Celina, who are going to share their thoughts on this conversation as well. So, can you share? You know, I know you've been sitting backstage and waiting eagerly to share your thoughts with regards to this. Miranda, let's start with you. What are your thoughts in particular? And I know this can go in different ways, but in particular with regards to interracial relationships and how that plays out when you are sitting in the space that you are.
Um, well, can you hear me? Now that
We
I'm back.
can,
Woo, perfect.
yes.
I've got to say, I kind of pro interracial relationship because that's why I am here today. But yeah, I'm really, I think Shaq said the same thing. I'm for love. So any type of partnership that is created through love, genuine love, I am all for, no matter what form that comes in, who it is between, no matter what the skin color is, no matter what the gender is. I guess the complication, as was brought up earlier, can be when you are not aware of possibly why you are making those decisions. So I am not necessarily a supporter of interracial relationships because you have decided that you only want to date one particular race because of some sort of perceived privilege, let's say. I believe Percy was talking about that beforehand. You know, for me, it's a very regular thing. I am the product of two people who loved each other. And for me, once I got to the point where I even understood what race was, like I said earlier, I did not grow up even having that concept for a while. When I was little, I was born, as most of us are, being completely blind to what that means. It never, nothing dawned on me, the fact that when I went to go see one side of my family, they were one color and one side of my family looked another color, because I grew up with that reflected everywhere around me in my immediate household and then outwards. It wasn't until I went to the outside world and I was in school and somebody called me Black for the first time, I didn't even understand that it had anything to do with my skin color, even because it's like I'd never even heard the term before. And so for me, interracial is very natural. It's not something that makes me bat an eye. I've actually, as I began to understand more about race, I always thought it was something that was very beautiful, that you could blend two backgrounds, two cultures, two livelihoods together and create something new. I thought it was beautiful that, especially in a time, even more so for my parents and older generations, where it was even less common, I always thought it was so beautiful that two people loved each other enough, knowing it was going to be difficult, knowing that it was even less acceptable at the time, getting reactions from the people in their lives, that they still chose to embark on a life journey together because they loved each other. So to me, a connection like that is something that is very, very beautiful when it is done for the right reasons. So losing train of thought, but you know, and then as you go along, kind of what Shaq was saying as well, I think it's just important then, when you do have two people that are entering this, that you do also have to understand that there are going to be different understandings of things, different experiences in life that you're going to have to learn to understand and be able to navigate. And I think that is true in interracial relationship. I think that's true in any relationship, really, but any mixing of cultures, any mixing of backgrounds, even mixing of shades. I've been in interracial relationships. I've been in a relationship of different shades, and even that, still dating somebody of color, but who has had a very different life experience because of the color of their skin, and having to navigate that and understand, why don't you feel comfortable in this situation? Why do you feel awkward being in this store? Why do that just happen? Why does it have to be about race? But having to understand that our life experience has been so different, myself understanding that my life experience as a light-skinned woman, as a woman who lives in Canada, as a woman who is in the suburbs, what my experiences have been just based on what school that I went to. We've talked about this in Shades rehearsals as well, where there are situations where being light-skinned has given you privilege. There are situations where being light-skinned has given you disprivilege. Same with the dark-skinned community. When we talked about our schools that we went to, for some people, being Black was, you know, being dark-skinned Black gave you the power. In other places, if you were the only one, then it was something that definitely was a drawback and made school life very uncomfortable for you. I have been very blessed in my life to just have had an experience that I have not had to have, at least not that I was very aware of. You start to learn more as you grow up. You start to realize things that where your skin color probably came into play. But in general, I haven't had hugely traumatic, nothing violent has happened to me because of my skin color, that sort of thing. And to be with somebody who has experienced those things, you need to be able to get yourself to a place where you can truly understand that. And that just because that has not been your reality does not mean that it is not somebody else's reality. And how do you then navigate those spaces together? So for anything, for any two sides of a coin that are coming together to now navigate life together, understanding, again, communication understanding is just going to be so very important. And again, bringing it back to Shades, that's what I love about this show in general, is that it really is about all the different experiences put together, because everybody has a voice about this. Everybody has an experience, and they're all valid. They're all different. They're all real. And it's about being able to see all of those and bring it together.
Yes, well said. And they're all needed, right? All of those voices are definitely needed. And Celina, I'd also like to go to you as well. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts, I think, are a little bit different. Where, to what Miranda's saying, I feel like if it is about love, and that's a beautiful thing. Are you guys hearing feedback from me?
I can hear you. A little bit of feedback.
I think the chat in the other one is, you have to mute it if you're watching in the live.
I've definitely closed it, but we will try to continue.
I can hear you.
Okay. I think that's better. Sorry about that. Okay.
That's okay.
So I do feel a little bit differently, only because I came from a mixed race relationship where I don't feel that both parties were committed to what that meant to produce a child that is of mixed race. So I unfortunately didn't have the experience of having both of my parents present. I was raised with the European side of my family, and only now, and really through this experience, does that become really evident to me, and it's really difficult to navigate. So I'm so distracted by the feedback. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And of course, because we're live, these things happen, right?
Yeah.
I am going to ask Miranda and Esie if you can mute your mics briefly while Celina is giving her share. That will assist in the leaving of that echo. So Celina, if you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so to what I was saying, I love, and I want to believe in, if someone finds someone and they happen to be of mixed race, and it comes with such a great responsibility. But I think if you're not committed, or the idea, there's so much to unpack here with like the fetishization of Black men, and feeling like you might be a product of that is really a lot to sit with, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people consider when they are going into interracial relationships. And I was talking with Esie this morning, just even with globally what's happening, the feelings that I feel are very real, and they're very heavy, and to experience absolute silence from the white side of family, who, I don't know what their reasons for silence are, whether they just don't understand or whatever it may be. There are no words for that, right? And also feeling like you're constantly teetering this line where, okay, I'm clearly visibly not white, but I've been raised with white people, and that's what I see, and that's what I know. And they'll never understand, because outwardly facing, I can still have the same treatment that any Black person. I realize that I do have privilege being lighter skin, but I'm still placed in the same box to white people. I am not one of them. And then on the other hand, with my Black peers, it's the same thing, where it's like, you're light skin, you're this, and I just feel like I want to go somewhere. And it's not a nice feeling to feel like you're literally searching to belong somewhere, to at least have someone understand you. I'm a crier. To have someone understand, and I understand the privilege, and I think that's where I really battle, because I really want to be an ally to as many people as I can, because I know I'm on both sides of the fence. But in making space, it's almost like, what about my feelings also?
Yeah, and I can hear it in your voice, and I know that, and I understand the depth of what you're sharing, and I thank you for being so vulnerable as well today, and being so open because it's not an easy discussion. We shared that today already. Not an easy discussion to have, and many can relate to what you are sharing, Celina. So thank you for opening that up as well. Really appreciate you. And I know, Miranda, you had something additional to share as well.
I did, and I love you, Celina. I just I wish I could reach through the screen and hug you. And it was funny because I know that Celina and I have different experiences, so I knew that like they were going to go like this. And to piggyback off of what you said, as I do, and I'm a firm believer in let's do it for love. I do also have to. I do also acknowledge, and working on this also helped me acknowledge that you might not even know. And I think that's like a lot that we've been talking about is you might not even realize why you are making some of the decisions that you are making. You might not realize that you might be attracted to a certain person for those reasons. Of something that they might be able to give. Like Percy was saying, maybe you don't realize that you actually don't want your child to have the same experience that you had. So maybe you do find yourself unconsciously looking for a partner that's going to produce a child that is lighter than you, let's say. And so while I am a huge supporter in it of being of love, I do recognize even more so now, more than ever, that there may be things that come into play and you might not even realize it, that they are unconscious. So I guess what I speak of is while those things might have seeped in from the world and wound up playing a role in it, I do still believe that love comes out of those things. And so I do say that I'm an advocate that if you have found somebody that you can make that bond with, and then, like I said, it's just a matter of having that responsibility of going in with the knowledge of you're going to be respectful, you're going to learn, you're going to be part of it, that it is a shared experience as opposed to picking somebody because they feel like they're your trophy or something, or they are your fetishized individual. They're something exotic. They are something to put you ahead in life. And I think that it's just work like this that makes you realize those reasons where you might find yourself leaning towards somebody in one way, shape, or a form. But I still am a hugely firm believer in that it can stem from love. And then, like I said, and then that I didn't really speak on the experience of being a biracial child. But then it is those types of things that you then have to realize it's also a responsibility, because you are then going to be creating these lives of these children who then also have to figure out their navigation in the world and what does that mean. I feel extremely blessed that I did have both of those sides available to me. It did also make me not have any idea necessarily sometimes where I fit in. And again, for a long time, that wasn't something that I even had to think about, which again, I'm so grateful for. And that is not an experience that, my coworker Celina had. And it's not the experience that many children have. When I did get to an age and I did get to a spot in my life, which pretty much came by the time I hit high school, that I really started to feel that whole feeling of people expecting you to pick a side or needing to fit in somewhere, and understanding that, well, I'm not exactly this visually, I'm clearly not white, but do I really fit in with what is considered, the Black culture? Do I speak right? Do I speak that way to reflect that is stereotypically who I am? Or do I know the dance moves? Do I dress the right way? I grew up with most of the same children all through school, and it just so happens that most of my friends were white. Was I supposed to get to high school and suddenly start hanging out with a different group? I don't know these people. These are people I've known since I was 5 years old. It wasn't until about high school that I really had to start navigating that sort of thing. And it really is something that continues on through your life, really. And I know that myself, along with many, I do have a number of mixed race biracial friends. And I feel like a lot of us don't really, I shouldn't speak for anybody, but for me, I don't really like the thought of having to feel like I need to pick a side, because I am not one side of a coin. I'm made up of two different elements. And the same way that I should be embracing my Black culture, my Black ethnicity, my roots, I also want to embrace the other side, my white side, my European background, because that is both of who I am. So I've always struggled with things like pro-Black sentiments or anything that made it feel like, well, because Black culture and Black people have been held down so much, sometimes it can get to the point where we start to talk about, I find in some groups it can start to talk about, now we're going to talk about how Blacks are superior. And that also makes me go, because well, clearly I don't belong in this conversation because that's not who I am either. And really, I don't like to think of anybody being superior over anybody else. And I know that some people tend to shy away from the thought of pro-Black because of that. And that's where I feel like a lot of people get into just, I am pro-human race. And it might sound corny, but I am. Like, I don't value one side of who I am more than the other. I realize that outwardly one is reflected more because I can't just be white. I can't. In the entertainment world, if I go for casting for something, I am Black, or at the very least, I am mixed. I can never just be white. But in terms of actually what to celebrate that, I feel in my heart that I choose and desire to be able to celebrate both of those. And I know that I am also in a space in my life where I am able to do that. And I am grateful that I am not persecuted for wanting to do that, or, I'm in a space where I have the right that I can do that. And so far it has not been something that has led to any huge upheaval in my life. But like I said, I think what was created came out of something that was beautiful. And I celebrate that on both sides, again, because of my experience.
Thank you so much for that share. You want to celebrate who you are as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And hearing that is just, it's so moving for me, and to even see your response and hear your response, both of you, Miranda, Celina, because our realities, our experiences will be different. But knowing and hearing this, I think what this conversation is doing for me, and I'm hoping what it does for others as well, is that it causes us to look at each other and to meet each other with greater love, because we're coming in with so many different experiences and coming from so many different realities, that when we meet in this space, when we meet in the middle and we hear the experience between a light-skinned individual and a dark-skinned individual, and we're hearing each other's experience, there's all of a sudden this explosion of greater understanding, greater love, greater empathy, greater desire to be able to open up more conversation. So I really want to thank you both for being, again, so open with your share. And Esie, I'm going to go to you. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share before Miranda and Celina sign off with us?
No, I appreciate these women so much, as well as everybody else in the cast. I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm very, very fortunate to have these people as friends. To be able to have walked this path with them, to think that we would be able to be here at this time right now in the world, to be able to share this conversation and share our honesty. And this was an honesty that we formed in the room, that everybody was able to trust each other with, and that we can really grow. Like, that for me was the thing. It's like we allowed ourselves to throw ourselves into the fire and to grow. And I would not be here if it wasn't for their honesty. I would not be here if it wasn't for their love, in terms of just being able to trust me to bring this forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Esie, because I think that's what a huge part of this is. It's about trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Being able to, the scope of that, and what you've been able, Esie, to develop within this space for these dancers and artists, I think is evident for many of us. That trust is living within that. And I thank you. I thank you to you as well, Miranda, Celina. Thank you for joining us as well. I'm going to say goodbye to you now. And I do want to encourage our listeners as well to continue to keep sharing on this avenue. Thank you again to you, Miranda and Celina. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And of course, Esie Mensah is going to remain with me here for another few minutes as we continue to speak and talk about shadeism and in particular what's coming up next. So Esie, do share, please do share. You know, I know that we have just a few more minutes left, but talk to us about what we can expect from Shades, what's coming up. Give us the lowdown, give Turnout Radio the exclusive.
Exclusive, yes, exclusive. I wish I had one to give you. But for me right now, I'm working on my skills as a director, my skills as a script writer, to be able to embody the show. And I had said for the people that have been here, I spoke about the need of wanting to bring this conversation into the education system. I wholeheartedly understand that I'm one person, and even though schools are closed, kids are now being bombarded with social media that is going to push a certain conversation onto them, a certain thought onto them, a certain way of allowing them not to feel that they are worthy, or that they are extremely worthy because of the attributes that they possess. So I just feel conversation. That has always been my thing with this topic. And has always been something that I really wanted to kind of push back on. I remember very early on in 2016 with Alexis Wood, when we were doing some like just live conversations with my sisters and some other people in terms of just interviewing people and understanding the work behind this. I should mention Alexis Wood and Lindsay Adewo that are the documentary directors, because Shades was a documentary as this was happening. So this was developing, and they caught the years from basically end of 2016 all the way until the main production at Factory Theater in 2018. So they were with us throughout those 2 years of development and saw the work and saw the ugliness and the anger and all of that stuff. So please look out for the documentary when it hits. We're really excited about that. But that documentary gave me the chance to dive in to the conversation. And I said really early on, when people would ask me, what do you want? And I was like, I want people to love each other better. I want us to empathize with our experiences better. And they were just like my lovely sister and a friend of mine were just like, that's not tangible. You know, you need something, dollars and cents. They're the business, they are the quintessential business people in terms of like, I need the rubric, I need, you know, all of the Excel sheets that tell me what it is that I'm gaining from these experiences. And I don't feel like we even actually put tangible or quantifiable efforts into what learning to love each other better is. Like, how does that play into it? How does actually being able to see each other better, empathize with our experiences better, so that we are now, or we can currently live in a very different situation? I feel that is so necessary. And I can't be, to me, that is as impactful as gaining $1 million in equity in your company. Like, to me, it's there. I don't even think there's a proper dollar sign on that, because as we could see right now, we need love. You know, what the world needs what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It sounds like such a cliche, but in actuality, it is what we need. That is at the root of what it is that we are seeking as a people. We want people to see us. We want people to see me as an individual. I want you to see my Black body and not see me as disposable. I want you to see me and not overlook me and my experiences because of the shade of my skin. So I feel it is so necessary for us just to be able to hear each other better and love each other better. So I'm hoping that from this conversation and the honesty of these people that I have in my life, that they know and understand that you have painted my world very, very differently. And I pray that through this conversation, and thank you so much, Nicole, for facilitating it, is that we've been able to shift the lives of other people as well.
You definitely have. You've done it for me. And I want to thank you, so much for the privilege, really, of sitting with you and sitting with the cast today and discussing this very, very needed topic. And I do want to encourage our listeners as well, because I know that this has been a heavy and weighty discussion, but I really feel that it's been educational and insightful.
Mhm.
Please do send in your comments. And for those of you who weren't comfortable sending in those private questions, because we really want you to also feel like you're in a space that's safe enough to do that. So please do send in those questions. They can even send them directly to you.
Mhm.
I know, AC, you and I had spoken about that. Individuals can message you. You can, of course, be found on social media. For those who are not following, I mean, who's not following AC, but can your your handle is now showing up on our screen at AC Mensah. And of course, we had some messages that came in from individuals who were wishing to donate. Thank you for those donations. I know that
Yes.
that must mean a lot to you, AC, and the cast.
I am so grateful for all of the donations that have been coming in over the last couple of days. I felt that with the people that are putting their hearts on the line and bringing their truth, that hopefully if people did gain something, that you don't mind offering something, because sometimes the offering is not going to even amount to the amount of value that you've received in information. From this 3-hour conversation. Realistically, it's like you could really change someone's whole course of their life, and is $10 is a donation. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that has donated, that is continuing to donate. And if you choose to even donate after this, please know that all of the money is getting split with all the individuals that were a part of this today, because without their voices, we wouldn't be here. So I appreciate all of it, and everything that comes in, may it come back to you tenfold. So,
yes, tenfold.
Yeah.
AC, thank you again for joining me. I'm looking forward to a possible part 2.
Yes. Oh, yes. yes. It's happening.
and 3 and 4 and 5.
Yeah.
But I do again want to thank you and the cast again for being so open with your share today. Many individuals, I think, are going to walk away with more unpacking and more information and more things that they are themselves potentially going to open up to with regards to shadeism, colonialism, and, as I mentioned, the state of our global climate. So my gratitude to you this afternoon. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. And I want to give actually a big shout out to Nicole. When I was thinking about doing this, she was the only person that I knew that could handle this, and as a journalist, as a radio host, as somebody that is actively speaking up for not just the dance community, but for our community in general, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for sharing space with us, for speaking and speaking so beautifully on subjects that allow everybody to be a part of. So, my sister, I thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. I so appreciate you and appreciate those words. It really does mean a lot. I'm grateful for this wonderful community that we exist in.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful place to exist in. So the shares will continue, the conversations will continue. And to you, I return and say thank you, AC.
It's felt, it's received. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you for your comments, your shares. They have been seen, and we are grateful as well for you taking the time to share those with us. And for those of you who've not had a chance to visit us at Turnout Radio, you can do that, of course, at turnoutradio.com. You can find more interviews with AC as well, and some of the members of the cast at Turnout Radio, previous interviews and shares over the course of the past many years that Turnout Radio has been broadcasting, actually since 2016. So visit us at turnoutradio.com. And of course, I'm Nicole Hamilton. I will look forward to receiving your messages as well with regards to today's broadcast.
Yes.
Thanks again to you, our beautiful listeners, and to you again, AC Mensah.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for doing this. And we look forward to continuing the conversation.
My pleasure. That's it for now, folks. Join us again next week at Turnout Radio at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you and hearing you very soon.
CIUT 89.5, Toronto.